Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. So, thank you all for joining us for the XR Innovation Summit 2023. Super excited to have each and every one of you here. Co-hosting the event with me is my lovely friend, Jennifer. I'll allow Jennifer to introduce herself and we'll get fully started.
Hello, everyone. Great to see those of you again that are joining us this year. Really excited about the event. My name is Jennifer Rogers, as we've already said. Great opportunity for us to get together as friends and share with you all some of the amazing talent in the XR space, and particularly people that are doing XR for good. So I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to the show.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So let me introduce myself again. My name is Arume Ibrahim. I am from Nigeria, and I'm also the executive director of Immersive Tech Africa. I lead an amazing team at Immersive Tech Africa that is making this happen, the XR Innovation Summit 2023. And this is the second edition with the team driving innovation and social impact with XR. It's a 3-day event with amazing keynote sessions and product sessions. And the last day is going to be filled with some interactive panel sessions. So please look forward to it. And I'll be sharing an overview of what the summit is about, why we're here, what we'll be talking about, some of the amazing speakers that will be sharing their insights and experiences, and what you should expect as regards the summit for the next 3 days starting from today. So moving on, the summit is basically showcasing the best in terms of XR, not just in Africa, but also across the world. We're uniting and gathering industry experts, thought leaders, and innovators who are excited about XR, right? And looking forward to seeing how they can fuse extended reality technology for innovation and also social impact. And we're working with the team for this year, basically is driving innovation and social impact with XR. And the goal is to see how we can empower entrepreneurs, investors, developers, and curious minds like you guys to share your experiences and insights, and also some of the panelists and keynotes that will be shared on the session to see how we can drive key sectors, not just in Africa, but also across the world, leveraging on emerging technologies. And special announcement, today is the Africa Day, right? And funny enough, I think the summit dates, we did not have it in mind to like have it on this day, but we're glad it did, right? And today is the commemoration of the African Day. And basically, it's a legendary celebration focusing on the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, which is OAU, and it's now known as the African Union. Right? So it's 60 years so far, which is great. Right? I'm happy to be African. I'm blessed to be African. And we'll have some amazing African speakers on the lineup who will be sharing their experiences with XR. So the theme for this year is Our Africa, Our Future. And we believe that the future of Africa is indeed blessed. And we have some amazing talents that will be showcasing what they think they are currently doing with XR that can drive innovation and also social impact. So like I said, I have Jennifer as my co-host. So an amazing story is me and Jennifer did this with Emilios in 2021, and it was super amazing. And I'm glad and always happy to have Jennifer on board anytime we're having the summit or any short discussions in the near future. So this is the amazing team. We have Oluwabumi, who is our programs lead at Immersive Tech Africa, and Alike Otoga, who's also our communication lead at Immersive Tech Africa. We have Trifina and Emmanuel, who are running social media and community management for the organization, and also we're supporting the activities of the XR Innovation Summit. We also have my good friend Yambura from Kenya. Max also is also lovely. And Sarika Oricha, who is our lead for XR technical training at Immersive Tech Africa. Our second initiative for this year is the XR Innovation Launchpad, which is a 10 weeks training program for those aspiring developers and creatives that want to get started with XR, not just in Africa, but anywhere in the world. Right? So watch our social media handles, and we'll be sharing more updates about that in the next coming months. Okay, see, this is what we did in 2021, the first edition. We had some amazing line of speakers. I know Jennifer had a short time there too, right? And we have amazing professionals from PwC, Unity, Virtual Lab, Metaverse, my good friend, and Arika Studio. So this year we have a couple of them that are coming back to share what they have so far achieved since 2021. For example, Judith from Immersive 3D. We have Daniel Gachu from Ethiopia. We have Derek. And I think this year is more focused on how we can drive serious conversations on not just the hype in the metaverse, but real action and real impact using extended reality technology. And our first session for today will be by Kabiru Seidu. He'll be talking about how we can revolutionize agriculture in Africa through virtual reality greenhouse simulations. Sounds interesting, and I'm also looking forward to his session. So I'll be breezing through the lineup so we can catch up with our schedule for Kabiru. We have Harrison who'll be talking about Up 360 virtual reality education and training solution. It's a product session, so expect some amazing features from him. Then we have Joe who'll be talking about human connection in virtual workplaces, immersion, belonging, and engagement. And my good friend Valentine will be talking about why can't I say it, XR and connectivity issues. And he'll be sharing his amazing solution on how we can actually solve connectivity issues as regard XR. Then Kevin, we're talking about XR and contemporary-based experimental learning, which is a very interesting topic. Someone will be talking about XR, the built-in browser of the digital era. Right, I'm also looking forward to this session. And Diriti, we're talking about XR in education and training and how we can enhance learning experiences through immersive technologies. And then our good friend Judith, we're talking about the transformational power of emerging technologies for learning. And second, they will Dr. Morris will be talking about educational transformation through metaverse teaching and learning. And then Hamed will be talking about his amazing products with XR and how businesses and brands can empower web presence using their platform. Daniel will be talking about arts and culture, how we can revive cultural heritage with XR. Derek will be talking about empowering brands to boost sales and engagement, leveraging on augmented reality experiences and virtual try-ons. And then an interesting topic, Elena will be talking about Web3. It's nothing, so you guys should look forward to that also. Jacob will be talking about Wally Visual. He'll be sharing some projects from his startup and the amazing work they are doing here in Africa. And then Tosan will be talking about connectivity as a catalyst, how we can leverage on telecommunication technologies for XR innovation and social impact. And then Sika will be talking about XR for all, Nintendo philosophy applied, which is quite interesting. And the third day will be about panel sessions all through. I'll be moderating this session on XR and storytelling and exploration of creative possibilities. And the second panel session will be from the Atlantic Institute. They'll be talking about community develop AR, bringing us together when we are apart. And the third one will be on building an inclusive XR ecosystem, strategies for strengthening diversity and inclusivity. And the last session during the panel discussions will be how XR and Web3 can amplify Africa's creativity for meaningful social impact. So yeah, that's the lineup for the 3 days. It sounds interesting. And these are our ecosystem partners. I want to say a very big thank you to their support, and the acknowledgement and the amazing work they are doing not just in the African XR ecosystem, but also across the world. Jennifer, do you have any remarks for the audience?
I'm just thrilled to see what our speakers have to share with us. I think it's really exciting on behalf of the XR space. Obviously, from an IEEE perspective, we're really focused on the ways in which this technology can come into the world and help to bring opportunities to people. So that's what the show's all about. So looking forward to hearing great speakers and learning a little bit around how we're all kind of approaching these challenges together.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So we have Kabiru. I think Kabiru is ready for us. I'll be adding Kabiru to the stream. and then we'll get started immediately. All right, so let's all wait for Kabiru. I hope he's with us.
I see him joining.
Yeah. I think he's still trying to put on his camera. Great.
There he is.
You're muted. You're muted, Kabiru. Great.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today.
Hey, man.
Thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks, Jennifer, for putting this together. I think it's a lovely opportunity to be able to just bring, Excel creators to share what it is they're doing in this space. And likewise, I'm happy to share what it is we're doing. So just for some context, my name is Kabiru Seidu, and I'm the co-founder of Nubian VR, which is an interactive product company based in Accra, Ghana. Additionally, too, as well, I do serve as programs director at Nubian Foundation, where essentially we explore the potential of emerging technology to be able to shape learning, and not just learning in the classroom, but also lifelong learning. So as you would hear from our work today in agriculture, I guess I'm happy to share what it is we're doing in this space. Just to check in, Ibrahim and Jennifer, are there any protocols that I need to go through, or I can immediately dive into
just get right onto it.
Awesome, thank you very much. So I would just take a moment to share my screen.
That's fine.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. This is such an important topic.
Yeah. So I guess let me know when you're sharing, and then we can allow you have the space.
Awesome.
So guys, if you are watching us from LinkedIn, from YouTube, from Twitter, please feel free to drop a comment and share your experience and thoughts about Kabiru's session, and also be sharing like highlights of the next sessions for you to look forward to, and also see what you can achieve from each and every one of the speakers that will be sharing their experiences today. I'm seeing your screen share, so
Oops. Oh no.
sorry. Okay, great. So
Awesome.
have fun, man. See you soon.
Super. So hello everyone. So today I would be sharing a vision which I'm excited about, which is a vision for agricultural upskilling in Africa, and I think it's a vision whose time has come. So like I mentioned, my name is Kabiru Seidu, and I'm at the co-founder of Nubian VR and also the CEO of Nubian VR. I also serve as product programs director at Nubian Foundation, which I did explain is an emerging technology not-for-profit that is focused on essentially bringing the benefits of emerging technology onto learning. Today, I would be sharing a project which we are working on, and a project which we are also very excited about, and a project which I think is intricately tied into, who we are as human beings, which is agriculture. So humans invented agriculture about 12,000 years ago. And up until then, essentially, we were roaming hunters and gatherers, essentially. We were just moving from one spot to another, finding food, foraging for food. But then 12,000 years ago, we decided that, okay, we were going to spend time cultivating food. And essentially, in that bid, in that singular invention, we were able to essentially create human settlement as we know them today. So whenever you think about agriculture, it's intricately tied to human settlement, largely because, we did not have human settlement up until agriculture. Surplus food that we generated from agriculture essentially was the backbone on which most of our human communities and human settlements were built upon. So agriculture has evolved a lot from its origins 12,000 years ago. Even if we go back to more recent history, essentially in the 1900s, agricultural systems of the world were feeding about a population of about 1.6 billion people. So that's 1.6 billion mouths, for lack of a better word. But by 2050, something interesting is happening, which is human population is growing, and essentially we would need to have the agricultural skill to be able to feed 9.7 billion mouths. That's a lot. That is, more mouths than we've ever fed before, and more mouths, than we fed in the turn of the 1900s. But feeding 8 billion mouths as it is right now is a lot of strain. Agriculture as it is, 80% of deforestation that we have on the planet right now is as a result of agriculture. 70% of our water consumption on the planet is channeled towards agriculture. And agriculture too as well remains a significant contributor to climate change, and also to pollution of our water bodies. All the fertilizers, all the weedicides, all the pesticides that we use inevitably find their way into our water bodies. So in all of this agricultural conversation, I think it's very important to note that Africa is the central battleground, and for several reasons. 65% of uncultivated arable land on the planet is in Africa. That's very significant. What that means is that all of these tools that we are looking at in terms of just agriculture putting lots of pressure on our ecosystem, lots of it would literally be felt on the African continent in the coming few years, largely because Africa has the burden of feeding the rest of the world. The reason being that we do have the largest amount of uncultivated land. So most of the attempts to grow food on the planet, we would be seeing them happening on the continent. So in short, Africa cannot afford to get it wrong in terms of agriculture. And also too as well, lots of the African population too as well is employed by agriculture. So in 2010, I think the statistics shows that we had about almost 50% of the African population employed by agriculture. But today, that number is gradually declining to about 43%, which is a big problem. A big problem because we have more people on the planet, so commensurately we need more food on the planet, and farmers are essentially the custodians of our food on the planet, and it's essential that we are able to have more people interested in agriculture. But that's not the case as we see from the data. So with all of the picture that has been painted right now, I think there's an urgent need for us to be able to transition our agricultural system from one that takes lots of toll on the environment onto one that essentially is eco-friendly. So we need to be able to transition our agricultural system to one that is climate smart and eco-friendly too as well. The amount of land that we use for farming, the amount of water resources that go into farming, the amount of reliance we have on weedicide and pesticide, essentially, we need to be thinking of alternative ways of being able to go about agriculture, produce more food without taking this much toll on the planet. So the alternative for that, which we know at this point in time, is greenhouse farming. Greenhouse farming provides ways in which you can, increase your yield without having to increase the amount of land that you have. It also provides ways in which, by growing in a greenhouse, most people are able to save even sometimes up to 90% of water usage that they have in the agricultural system. By using things like drip irrigation, you can really cut down on the amount of water that you use. At the same time too as well, with the amount of, just by growing in a greenhouse, your reliance on weedicide and pesticides too as well is largely reduced, because you're growing in a controlled environment, and essentially you're growing in a space where you don't have frequent attacks of pests and diseases. But then, I mean, yes, greenhouse offers some solution, but I mean, we do have a challenge too as well as it relates to greenhousing. So first of all, I mean, most farmers on the continent have really had, really been practicing their methods of farming for thousands of years. These are methods of farming that were passed on from generations to generation, and we haven't also spent lots of time or lots of resources in being able to get farmers to move from the traditional means of farming into means of farming that are much more climate smart. And this is something that we would have to deal with in this decade and also the whole of this century, largely because we need to be able to start growing food in a way that is climate smart. We cannot continue with business as usual. That certainly would not work. So we need to find a very reliable way of essentially transitioning farmers from their current agricultural methods to one that is climate smart. And XR does provide lots of opportunities. I mean, so first of all, I mean, XR provides a reliable way for being able to train farmers. Reason being that up until now, I mean, the kinds of trainings we can provide to farmers are limited by face-to-face interactions, but also for places that were more advanced in the sense of introducing farmers into, training methods that were digitally facilitated or digitally enabled. It also came with an added barrier, which is you needed to be able to essentially get farmers to be digitally literate, and that's not a small task. But XR provides a very unique opportunity, which is contextual training. Every farmer knows how to farm their land, and consequently, that same knowledge can be transitioned into, greenhouse farming if the training environment is made very contextual. So as opposed to training farmers in a way that, okay, right now where you essentially have to engage with them on a one-on-one basis, or where essentially you have to be able to train them using traditional methods. What we can do with VR is really to be able to bring on farmers with limited digital skills, limited educational backgrounds, put them in a contextual environment, which is a greenhouse, a virtual greenhouse, or a digital replication of a greenhouse. Some people would call it digital twins. Put them in that kind of context, and essentially they are able to feel their way around. Every farmer knows how to hold a trowel. Every farmer knows almost how to pick up a watering can. Every farmer knows, how to inspect their plant. So all of these kinds of skills, essentially, we're trying to bring them bring them to farmers using XR. And the opportunity that provides is very immense, because up until now, if you decided you wanted to train a farmer using a computer or a smartphone, they needed to be able to navigate that digital interface, that 2D digital interface, because we must remember that, most computers, most smartphones are abstractions of reality. But then with an XR or a virtual reality headset, essentially, you can put a farmer within context, situate them in a context that provides them the opportunity to be able to essentially learn about greenhouse farming. So there are lots of people have questions as to why train people for greenhouse using XR, and the reasons are numerous. The first one is, 2D interfaces are complicated. Like, we need to be able to train people contextually, and that's really what XR brings into the picture. At the same time, too, as well, traditional greenhouse training methods are also, they're also long. For you to be effective, to say you're effectively trained in greenhouse farming, you need to at least have gone through one cycle of farming. So if you're farming a vegetable, what that means is that it probably takes you about 4 to 6 months to be able to, see all of the different cycles of of farming, from the seedling stage all the way to the, fruiting stage, all the way to the decline of the fruit. Like, you need to be able to see all of that happen in real time. Also, at the same time, if you're able to essentially provide, in a greenhouse, if you're able to, if you take any action in a greenhouse, it takes a while before the plants respond to it. If you apply a pesticide, if you apply a weedicide, if you apply water, like, you don't see the immediate consequence of your action. But then in the greenhouse simulator, essentially you're able to go past all of these time constraints to be able to provide people with a very clear context of what it is their action has resulted in. Thirdly, I mean, the importance of being able to train people in a greenhouse is one. I mean, being able to train people in XR to farm in greenhouses is, you can essentially draw more youth into agriculture. We saw the numbers. We've seen that lots of people, lots of farmers are essentially, the population of farmers on the continent is declining. This is an opportunity to be able to attract more youth into farming. By using XR for farming, essentially we are able to beckon on the youth to say, okay, this is no longer the kind of agriculture that your parents did, where, they had to toil, or they had to, go through lots of, like, manual labor to be able to provide food. Essentially, this is a much more, for lack of a better word, 21st century way of growing food. And I think that would have an appeal to the youth. But most importantly, too, as well, growing in a greenhouse also has its curves. I mean, it's learning curve. And essentially, I mean, if you're a first-time greenhouse farmer, the risk that you face is losing your produce. Like, while learning on the job, essentially you can end up in a cycle in which you don't have any kind of produce. And for most farmers, that is a very severe consequence. So to be able to avoid all of that, we essentially can create a safe space that makes it possible for farmers to be able to fail, as opposed to failing on their real farm. I mean, they can have this greenhouse where essentially they're able to try out different kinds of approaches to farming in the greenhouse. And based off of that, they're building the mental models and the mental maps on how to be able to grow in a greenhouse. So just for some context, I mean, Nubian Foundation is very interested in this space. Nubian Foundation is building technology around this space. And for the Nubian Greenhouse Simulator, essentially what we are trying to do is to be able to, simulate the growth of plants. At this point in time, I mean, simulating plant growth is very, it's very complicated in some sense. So we are limiting what we are doing right now to just vegetable plants, and particularly tomato plants. So we are being able to simulate the procedural growth of a tomato plant all the way from like a seed onto a mature plant and to harvest too as well. Additionally too as well, the greenhouse simulator provides you the space to be able to simulate environmental conditions. So humidity, temperature, air pressure, all of these stuff have consequence on on the food that we eat, or the food that we grow, or on plants when they're growing. So being able to simulate this provides a much more realistic environment for you to be able to essentially simulate, the real life situation a farmer would have to go through. At the same time too as well, we're simulating soil condition. Different kinds of soils result in different kinds of yield. So these are also very important for farmers to know. So essentially in the greenhouse simulators, farmer would be able to, change the conditions of their soil, and by that doing, understand the context of how a more nutritious soil results in more nutritious food. But most importantly too as well, all of this, simulations are great, but the most important thing is for a farmer to be able to build transferable skills. Transferable skills in the sense of being able to go into your greenhouse, see a plant, inspect the plant, have different kinds of interactions with the plant, and be able to essentially have all of that interactions that you're having result in either either result in your plant thriving or in the demise of your plant. So by just being able to simulate all of these conditions, essentially we are able to drag farmers from a point of the traditional methods of farming up until the point where essentially they are able to start building the kinds of aptitudes that are necessary to be able to essentially grow in the greenhouse. This is just some visuals of some of the work in which we're doing right now. So this is the simulation of a fruiting tomato plant. At the same time too as well, this is just a UI depiction of the different soil information or soil condition that affects the growth of a plant. So all of this essentially do have consequence on how the plant actually grows. At the same time too as well, we know that different seeds result in different kinds of yield, and at the same time too, different kinds of seeds require different kinds of care. So what we're trying to do at the same time is to be able to get farmers to understand this, but understand this in a safe space, in a space where essentially they are able to, failure does not mean that they would lose a cycle of their crop. So you can see over here, from the soil, you can see the different kinds of conditions. So this particular soil requires about 32 degrees centigrade. It requires a certain amount of watering. Its nutrient needs are stated, and the duration, of how long it would take for this plant to mature, it's all there. So it's now up to the farmer to be able to provide this care routine to the seedling for it to transition from a seed into a fruiting plant. But more importantly too as well, one of the things which we're trying to do is to be able to essentially get farmers to learn in their local dialect. And I think with the explosion of videos, I think there's a unique opportunity over here. Videos, voice interface too as well, provide an opportunity for a farmer who, for example, does not understand English or cannot even read in English, to be able to present them with information that they do understand. So using video lessons embedded in a virtual space, essentially we're able to guide farmers about the different processes that are essential for their plant growth or their plant care. At the same time too as well, we are currently exploring the possibilities of being able to essentially have farmers essentially voice input in their local language, be able to result in actions and interactions within the virtual space. So this is a project that we think is highly essential. As we move from as the population of the planet rapidly increases and the pressures on the agricultural strain on our environment also intensifies, there is a need for us to be able to alleviate this burden using the technologies that we have today. And XR has a critical role to play. And we are very confident that as this technology evolves, more and more farmers essentially will be able to build the kinds of skills that they need to transition from where they are now to farming methods that are essentially climate smart and much more friendly on the environment. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions you may have, and keep the conversation going too as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kabiru. Amazing work, by the way. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, fascinating conversation, and there's a lot of things that have been going on in the chat as you've been sharing with us, Kabiro. So I wanted to ask you a few of these questions because some of our colleagues are wondering if you have any thoughts or vision around the use of sensors that could match actual soil and plant characteristics, and which was from John, who's also on the screen, right? Who's also asked about just the reality of the simulations. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Awesome. So in terms of your first questions, in terms of just the ability to be able to match this, by all means, it is possible. So right now, at this point in time, what we are working on is really to be able to build the foundations of this simulation, which largely involves having a plant growth module, as well as also a very clear, model to as well for environment. So environment being, the external environment, weather, temperature, all of those kinds of stuff, and also having soil conditions too as well. So essentially, in terms of how close to this to reality is something we are actively building. It's definitely taking much more time than we intended it to take. But then at the same time too, as well as the technology matures, essentially we are able to take advantage of those advancements to be able to build this technology even much more robustly. But then as of now, I think most of the core technology to build a technology like this just does exist. It's just a matter of focusing the development effort towards it. I'm so curious about how you went about building your team. Are you collaborating?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we are experts in interaction design. So most of our, on interaction design and also learning design, that's really our expertise. So agriculture is something that is new to us. So essentially, we are relying on the expertise of people who are already in this space. So in Ghana, for example, we do have a range of greenhouse service providers, and as part of their service, as part of providing the greenhouse, they also provide access to training services. So right now, we're actually working with them to see how people who are acquiring greenhouses or people who've acquired greenhouses can essentially help us better taste this simulation. And as we continuously test it, eventually the plan is to be able to bring it out as a commercial product.
Wow, fantastic! I have one question for you. So some of the feedback that we get sometimes around introduction of emerging technology into industries or professions that have typically been very manual. Some of the response that we get from people sometimes is this technology is too overwhelming. For example, local farmers are not going to engage with this because it's just so foreign to them. What is your view? What are you actually finding with regards to the reception?
That's a very interesting question. But then for one, from our own experience, most of the people who we've engaged with, so we're yet to
Network issues, I guess.
I think Kabiro we might have lost him for just a second there.
Yeah. I guess when he's back on, I'll add him to the stream. But his session is quite interesting, right? I wanted to ask him a question around policies, right?
Yes.
The tech is amazing, but how can we get like agricultural organizations and government agencies to buy into it, right? And I also love the fact that they are powering the solution to also address language barriers, right? Because English is quite a lot for some farmers, so being able to learn in their own dialect would be a very huge plus.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see some comments in the chat even around climate change and the impact there, which I think is a great point and definitely something that I think he addressed a bit in terms of understanding the ways in which farmers locally can adjust to climate conditions. And I loved his point too about Africa and the role that it plays in terms of providing food to the world, right? This is a pretty big challenge that we all face. regardless of where we are. So the more that we can do to support and help people adjust to these conditions, I think the better off we all are. It's amazing work.
Yeah. And also like his focus on greenhouse, which is like a more innovative and advanced form of farming. It will be a very good plus for some maybe newbies that want to go into farming but don't want to do the dirty work, right? So them learn the concept or the basics of farming using maybe VR or AR will be a very good one for them. It's an amazing solution, obviously, but we need to see how they can fully push it to the market, get a very good adoption from maybe like cooperatives that have farmers and they can buy into it. And we believe in the long term would have more advanced and educated farmers who are aware of some key trends and tools in farming, and they'll be able to like give out higher input and outputs from their farming produce.
Absolutely. I come from a family of farmers. And, I think the point is well taken around how we attract the new generations into some of these trades that are so critical. So really excited about what they're working on and how we can essentially bring new young people into the profession.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we might have lost Kabiru, but I'm super glad we're having amazing participants from across the world. We have from Toronto, we have from Uganda. All right. The love is amazing. Thank you guys for joining. Tanzania,
Zambia.
Senegal, we have from the UK. Right. So it's amazing. Thank you so much for the love and support. So sadly, we might have to move on to the next session, and we already have Harrison from Up 360 in the back end, right? So we'll be adding Harrison shortly on the stream, and he'll be talking about his solution and product on how they are leveraging VR and AR for education and training. Harrison has been a very good supporter of what we're doing at Immersive Tech Africa, and I hope Harrison is ready for us to get started. I'll add him to the stream shortly.
Hey.
Hi,
Hey,
Harrison.
Harrison, how are you? How are you?
I'm great. I'm doing great. How are you both?
Oh, good. Thank
Well,
you so much. Sorry, we are bringing you a bit early. Kabiru had some technical difficulties, and we need to move based on the schedule we have. So you'll be basically sharing your insights and experience, and also project with us as regard Up 360. Also, we look forward to the amazing insights you'll be sharing with the participants.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you'd like, I can dive right into it and share my screen and
Sure.
share some of what we've been up to over the last few years.
that'd be
please
great.
do.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Harrison.
Okay. So let's do this. Present, share screen. And we're going to go with just the window for now. And can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, good.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of be here and, share some of what we've learned and, who we are. A few quick things I'm going to touch on is just who Up 360 is, a little bit about our studio, a little bit about what we do, share some of the projects that we have built, we are working on, and just kind of some of the fun approaches we take when it comes to virtual reality and XR with our partners. And then, hopefully just leave a good chunk of time at the end for Q&As so that, anybody with some questions and curiosities that want to dive a little deeper into anything I talk about, pretty much an open book when it comes to a lot of stuff. So without further ado, I guess I'll introduce myself. So my name is Harrison Olagis. I live in Prince Edward Island in Canada. But I run a studio as CEO and one of the co-founders based in Toronto, Ontario. We've been on a mission since 2016 to partner with different types of organizations and institutions across North America and now across the world to bring a new reality to education and training. I was somebody who did not like school growing up. I got labeled as, the not smart kid with the individualized education plan, dyslexic, ADD, and just did not really do well. I was lucky. I got a few good teachers. I got a few good mentors, and I really got hands-on with my education, so I was able to limp my way through. But for me, I wanted to find a way to make learning fun and more accessible for everyone. So when I discovered virtual reality and brought my passion for gaming with my passion for technology and my desire to want to make education better for everyone, that was kind of the seed for Up 360. And ever since then, we've been on this mission to, again, like, make education fun for people, make it more accessible for people, and make sure that people who might not be your traditional learner can find their passion, find their joys, find things that they get excited about, so that they can become excited about learning. So at Up 360, we're about a 30-person team. It's myself, my co-partner, my co-founder Matthew. I'm on the business side, he's on the technical side, and we've got a ton of really passionate people that have been formally trained in game development, game design, to actually apply that game talent to building products in education and products and training. And within the context of the company, we do a few different things. So we design experiences, whether a client is coming to us and they're just like, hey, I have this idea, I heard about virtual reality, what can I do with it? All the way through actually building the experience, deploying the experience, and helping support our clients on the ground with hardware and management and support long after we've built and shipped them something. Again, when it comes to this whole spectrum, there's been a lot of really interesting things we've learned over the course of the last 5-6 years, whatever it's been. The first thing has always been around hardware and support. If you want to build something in XR, as great as some of these open source things like OpenXR are, it's really, really hard to build great products that work on all devices. So you have to choose your focus. And for us, we've always been focused on wanting to build high fidelity simulations, high fidelity experiences. So we've kind of built these bespoke custom solutions with PC-based hardware, gaming laptops, and we kind of support clients right down to like picking their equipment, setting the equipment up for them and like shipping it to them, to make sure that we remove as many barriers as we possibly can. In being on the ground, like at that level with our clients, again, it's helped to inform a lot of like the other pieces of the business and like how we design experiences, and some of our approaches we've taken with like improving experiences over time. But for us, getting involved in the hardware and kind of choosing a lane with the hardware has really allowed us to, again, like pick a focus and make sure when we build and deploy a product, we're testing it with the same equipment internally that we would be shipping to our partners. The other thing that became a challenge really early on that a lot of like content creators will find is like, how do you deploy this type of content? We've tried Google Dropbox, we've tried device management tools, we've tried all these different tools, and at some point or another, we were just like, hey, there's nothing out here that's really designed to help get experiences in the hands of educators and trainers in a way that felt very open, felt very like developer friendly. Kind of what Steam did for gaming. So we ended up building our own internal solution to make that deployment process seamless. That tool is called the Immersive Learning Platform. Happy to share it with any like content creators or anybody building and distributing experiences with their partners. But really it was about, again, that end-to-end process, making it seamless, right? Getting the content in, making sure content was loaded on devices, making sure that teachers could use it, students could use it, they could view analytics, and then they could actually like actively be assigning stuff to students. So we played a lot in that realm, and it really went hand in hand with the actual like hardware. And then we build the solutions, and then now we have the tools to deploy the solutions effectively. When we're talking about some of our solutions that we've built, really we build in 3 different categories, or a combination of 3 different categories. And the first pillar that we always like to, or the first category that we always like to start with, is the make it fun pillar. A while back, and every now and then we work with partners that are like, hey, we just need you to teach XYZ, and we want you to do it however you feel it will be the most fun. So we've kind of built this pocket of projects that we call our educational escape rooms. I'll play a super quick video of just a snippet of one of them, and then we can guess what the actual curriculum is here. Oh, and just let me go back a slide. So we built this one probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And at the time, the TV series The Expanse was super popular. So our whole team was like, let's build something that's like space theme. But the curriculum in here, you might catch it as the video progresses. But it's actually related to teaching college students different bits and pieces of nursing. Right, figuring out how to assess patients, figuring out how to administer proper medications, read patient charts. And from start to finish, one of these escape rooms might take, a learner 30, 40 minutes to get through if they actually have that context. So we would build these projects with our partners, and the intent would be to give these to students as a way to assess their skills in lieu of like a pen and paper style test or quiz or exam. And some of the colleges actually would time 2 students going head to head in something like this. And then they would actually give the students bonus marks at the end of the year if they got their time under a certain point. So the Make It Fun projects for us are always the ones we love the most, because we get to kind of flex our creative muscles while also like delivering, really great learning outcomes. The next category of projects are the Make It Realistic projects. Because of the way we built our team out and because of the tech stack that we work in, which is all based on top of Unreal Engine, we're able to push the boundaries in terms of like the realistic look and feel of these experiences. So the screenshots that you see on screen here are actual screenshots in the experience. There's been no like post-processing stuff on it. Just because, again, Unreal Engine is a game engine that is built to just make things look as realistic as possible, from the lighting to how many objects you can get into a scene, to, again, refining that movement so that things just feel very, very natural. And we do a lot of things in the trades under the Make It Realistic category, whether that's like general construction safety training. This particular simulation is a whole bunch of colleges in Ontario got together and were like, we need a safer way to teach students how to cold start a boiler with something like power engineering. So that colleges every year, they come together and they say, hey, like, let's add another piece to this and another scenario. And now the colleges will use this before they actually put students in the lab to make sure that they're getting, better training, practicing the muscle memory and frankly, practicing scenarios that they would never get to try out in the real world. And then the last category, I can only talk vaguely about this one because this is a project we're in the middle of now, is the pushing the boundaries. So we either make it fun, we make it realistic, or we try to push the boundaries of what our own team and most people think is possible in virtual reality. So for us, this project that we're working on right now, we're aiming to release it at some point in 2024, but it's a collection of big partners in the not-for-profit space, in the employer space, who said, we want to change the way that we train our people to get employment opportunities, and pulling from some of the games that we loved, things like Fallout, things like Grand Theft Auto, these big, massive world, open experiences that are multiplayer, that are driven by, the user going through and wanting to discover. We've been kind of piecing together this new training tool that, again, massive multiplayer open world. The worlds are all interconnected, so you can travel from a construction site to a solar farm to a wind farm. And it's all driven by discovery and curiosity. So if somebody goes into these worlds, they can go start to explore. And then if they're like, hey, I want to go start this hero mission where I'm going to learn to drive an excavator or see if I have what it takes to climb to the top of a wind turbine. It layers in that discovery process with a little bit of a self-assessment, with core trainings that will help people get jobs in industries, whether that's construction, whether that's renewable, whether that's manufacturing. And we're staging this so that we can work collectively and collaboratively with partners all across the world to build different pockets of training resources in different worlds and different locations, so that if somebody wanted a hospital for medical training, we could implement that into the world. And again, driven by, wherever a user wants to go as they're, exploring this world and this project. So this is one we're really excited about, that we're planning on, again, releasing some point late next year. But we feel like this, is something that is going to push the boundaries in terms of what people think is possible when it comes to virtual reality in education and training, and take it that much closer to, the big AAA popular game titles that, a lot of the next generation of workers are used to seeing and used to playing. And then one, just kind of final piece of advice, and kind of, our approach and like what I suggest for like other founders and other people who might be looking to start, a business in XR, is like set yourself apart. We're in a really interesting phase right now in XR where, there is enough air in the room for everyone. The end game is to have everything in the world digitized, and like that's just not going to happen. So we work with and collaborate with all different types of studios that focus in all different avenues. But our approach has been very partnership oriented. So we want partners to work with hand in hand to build these types of projects and to build them to scale. So not building it once for one person, but building it for general industries that we can share, with as many people and impact as many people as possible. We've also taken the approach that is very like quality driven, where we're trying to build things to be as realistic and as high fidelity as possible. And sometimes it's kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because the hardware today to drive those simulations is incredibly expensive. So we're not building products to sell today. We're building products to sell, 5 years, 10 years out as the hardware really starts to catch up. And then we've been really focused on facilitators first. And what I mean by that is like, we're not just building simulations with the end user in mind. We're building it to work with teachers and trainers, because if it doesn't work for the teachers and it doesn't work for the trainers, it's going to be another piece of technology that you give them and it just sits on the shelf. And that's why that kind of holistic end-to-end approach with supporting and deploying and, really hand-holding is so important, especially in the early days of the technology. And then finally, it's just our passionate people. Again, we got a lot of really great, really passionate people on the technical side, on the business side, that just love what they do. And it's that passion that kind of gets injected to every single project we work on. And it's that passion that, again, keeps driving us and, keeps our company growing and attracts other partners that are passionate about education and other partners that are passionate about training. So that has been how we've set ourselves apart. But I'll, be quiet for a bit and, answer some questions if anybody has anything they want to potentially dive into a little deeper.
Great. Thank you so much, Harrison. Are you
Fantastic
done?
presentation. Yeah, I think we've got a few questions from the audience we might be able to sneak in before our next session.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
On the chat here, do we want to just read them out?
Yeah, here's the first one.
First
Awesome.
one.
Do we use any RFs for your development? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What would a NERF be?
I think it's like 3D scanning, but for
3D scans. Okay. No. So most of our development, we just build off of like site visits and photo and video references. The tool set in Unreal Engine helps us to make things look like super photorealistic, even though we're not necessarily taking like real scans. Every now and then we might like capture a high quality picture of like a texture or a surface that we can then embed into the actual simulation, like use a real texture. But the problem with 3D scans right now is when you scan an object, the fidelity of it is just like so high, and there's too many shapes and there's too many too much optimization that you need. So in a lot of cases, it takes more work to optimize a real scan than it does to just build the model from scratch. A mini metaverse. Yes. We try to avoid the word metaverse.
nice.
So many people don't know what it means. And again, there's arguments of like, what is the metaverse? But yeah, we stay away from the term metaverse and just say, massive multiplayer open world experiences, because that has been around for a long time and people know what that is.
Well, hey, I mean, the metaverse is really the opportunity for people to connect with each other, to experiences beyond kind of a flat two-dimensional space. So I think what you're doing definitely qualifies in that broad sense. And this is really amazing. We've got maybe one more question that we can get answered before we hop to the next.
Awesome.
Can you see that on the screen? It says, how do you achieve some form of employer validation and also access to HMDs?
Yeah, so employer validation really comes in like working with the partners that we build the content with. So for example, that power engineering simulation, we worked with 7 different instructors of power engineering across a consortium of these colleges. Throughout the entire process, the SMEs are feeding what the learning objectives need to be, you know, giving us constant feedback to make sure that, like, you know, the first thing we give them isn't the last thing they're going to use. Very, very iterative, agile process. And then in terms of access to the head-mounted displays and like the actual equipment, 2 different routes. Some colleges and some partners actually set up like a VR lab where they have a room or a classroom that might not be leveraged as a classroom every single day. And they can convert that space by pushing desks and stuff out of the way into like a VR learning lab, which we're basically saying, like, you know, you now have an immersive learning lab on campus. And then some of our other partners, we pack our kits down into like a little Pelican case with a laptop, so they can kind of just grab and go and set things up on the fly with the internal tracked headsets. And then you have like the external trackers, like the one you see here, which is the Vive equipment for the colleges that want like a dedicated VR space.
Fantastic. I think this fits in very well with a lot of the things we're doing around credentialing and the ways in which people can gain access to opportunities and be able to show that skill to the rest of the world through immersive tech. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. You can see on the screen, everyone is quite amazed with your session. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Awesome, my pleasure. And if anybody needs any support or advice or access to some free content, we got a lot of stuff that was funded by different, you know, government partners that is Creative Commons, and we're always happy to share and support any way we can.
Awesome, that's what I love to hear.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks, Harrison.
You too. Cheers.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening. So we have Kabiru in the back end. Kabiru will be joining us to answer some questions he has left right before we jump to Joe. Right. So I'm adding him to the stream. Welcome back, Kabiru.
Thank you. Apologies for the interruption.
Yeah, great. I think the last question we're trying to answer was from Abdul Alip, if I'm correct, talking about using XR simulation to train upcoming farmers, how it can be helpful in dealing with climate change.
So I mean, yes. Well, I think it's the core of my presentation, which is, I think XR has the potential to be able to transition farmers from their current methods of farming, which takes a severe toll on the environment, onto a climate smart approach of farming, which is what greenhouse farming actually does represent. So XR essentially provides a reliable way for you to be able to train farmers. Just to reference my presentation, there are several reasons why XR is important. So one, 2D interfaces can come with a certain kind of learning curve that if you're illiterate or if you have limited digital skills, you would struggle with. Some people too as well will argue that, oh, VR is also, you know, a digital interface that you have to navigate. That's true, but overwhelmingly too as well, VR interfaces are contextual. So by putting a farmer in a greenhouse simulator or in a look-alike virtual simulator, essentially, I mean, they have a context of what to do. I see a watering can, I know I'm to pick it up. I see a trowel, I know I can use it. I see a soil, it's the same kind of soil I see, you know, in my actual farm, so I know exactly what to do. So essentially, there is that opportunity to be able to just essentially, especially if you marry this very closely with the appropriate kinds of user experience. So by user experience, you know, a farmer is, I mean, probably doesn't speak English. if you're delivering your content, you cannot be delivering it in English. You need to be delivering it in ways that they can understand. So that means, being able to have local translations and being able to have lots of visual cues too as well. So essentially, I think there's lots of opportunity to be able to use XR to drive and, to transition farmers from the traditional methods onto approaches of farming that are much more climate smart. Do you use sensors to match this actual soil and plant characteristics? So we have virtual sensors, but in actuality, I mean, we are not trying to immediately promote so much technology in in greenhouse farming, largely because we need lots of people to transition into greenhouse farming. And for us, the bare minimum we're looking at is for you to be able to have an actual tunnel greenhouse and also have a drip irrigation system. Yes, I mean, subsequent iterations of the greenhouse simulations would include like having sensors, and they'll be a little bit more sophisticated. But more importantly, what we're trying to focus on is really the kinds of greenhouse solutions that are much more accessible to farmers. Most farmers locally within their communities can find a carpenter who can, put like a bamboo greenhouse. Myself, I mean, part of the reason of doing this is because I have experience in farming. I had someone build me a greenhouse, and the experience of actually growing in that greenhouse, it was a learning curve. I mean, so in West Africa, greenhouse farming is not so popular, but if you go to places like Southern and also Eastern Africa, it's a really big deal. So the person who taught me how to grow in a greenhouse was from East Africa, but then the pressure on him to be able to teach lots of other people to how to grow in greenhouse made it unscalable for him to be able to like teach everyone. So for me in particular, this was where the inspiration to be able to build a product like this really came into being. It's like, okay, how can we scale that transition from from regular agriculture onto greenhouse farming? So sensors are great. We certainly would have a more complicated VR simulations, we would have them, but primarily at this point, we are not trying to emphasize them too much because it would be, I mean, it's the financial requirements necessary for a farmer to be able to get that does not make it so feasible or totally relevant. Not, I wouldn't say relevant. It's relevant, but they're not. It's not the first, the most critical aspects to be tackling at this point in time.
Great. Thank you so much, Kabiru. What's the best platform people can reach out to you if they have any more follow-up questions?
LinkedIn. I think I'm most responsive on LinkedIn. So yes, let's. I also communicate more on LinkedIn too as well, so we can continue the conversation over there too as well. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank Kabiru for his session. We'll be moving on to Joe's session, which is starting in a couple of seconds. She'll be talking about human connection in virtual workplaces, immersion, belonging, and engagement. And Joe is already in the background. I'll be adding her to the stream. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Hello. Hi.
It's great to have you.
It's so good to be here. And what amazing couple of presentations to kick off your summit.
Thank you. Yeah, it's blowing my mind already. What people are doing in the space and how everyone's working together to make a real difference.
Yeah.
So we're thrilled to hear from you on your topic. We don't want to take any more time from you. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and share and get us started around the human connection.
Up and running. Okay.
Perfect.
This is where we want technology to work for us.
Indeed.
Okay, so if I present.
There it is. Take it away.
Okay, am I getting full screen there?
You are. Looks
excellent.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. And I'm going to be rubbing my hands a lot. It's very cold here in Cape Town. We've eventually we've got there. It is winter now, so it's time for me to come and visit some of my friends in warmer climes. But awesome to be here. And I would usually start by just surveying the room a bit. I actually can't see the chat box while I'm presenting my screen, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, because I can go back and look later. I'd like people that are currently watching just to drop into the chat box, whether you're currently working fully remotely, whether you're working in kind of a hybrid environment, you go in sometimes you work from home or somewhere else, or whether you're working 100% from an office. And I like to ask this question because the answers I get these days tend to be very, very different from the ones that I got when I was speaking about remote work before the pandemic, for obvious reasons. We've entered this new era of different ways that we work together. And I find it interesting that it takes a global health crisis for us to realize the benefits of flexible working. It's quite flabbergasting when you think about it. So my name is Jo. I advise remote and hybrid organizations on how to engage and help their teams connect in more authentic human ways through the power of things like digital technology, and creative virtual experiences. So this is totally my wheelhouse, and I'm really excited to take you through a little bit of my work, a little bit of my research as well that I've been doing recently. So I'd like to take us back to that weird time at the height of the pandemic, and loads of things happened, but there's two themes that are relevant for tonight. And the first one was that we were thrown into this kind of remote work experiment. We weren't prepared for it, and we did the only thing we could do. You know, we made the best of a bad situation, and we used the tools at our disposal to work. The other thing that happened was that we weren't allowed to socialize much for quite a while. And, you know, depending on what country you were based in at the time, there were varying different levels of lockdown. And I tried to forget about it, but it's forever etched in my memory, the amount of time I actually had to spend with my husband. And no offense, he's great, he's fine, but smaller doses if possible. But, you know, I had a job, I had a roof over my head, we were healthy, you know, so on the scale of things, very lucky. But it was a crazy time. And the interesting thing for me really was that we seem to still have this collective mindset that these two things are connected and are related to each other, when in actual fact the only thing that they have in common was that they were put into place, they came into being because of the pandemic. And I say that because, you know, we've now got what you call things like this, the return to work mandates, if you like, as if we weren't working before. And you've got really high profile people like Elon Musk, like Sam Altman of OpenAI, all saying, you know, you've gone back to work, and saying bizarre things like, you know, it's morally wrong to work from home. And I don't, it's a bit of an aside here, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the people that are very anti-flexible working situations are usually those that maybe don't have that many commitments other than the work that they have to do. So perhaps they don't have to go and pick up children from school. Perhaps they aren't expected to look after elderly relatives or, you know, be there for people in other ways as well. And, you know, in South Africa, I always say, like, at the moment, our load shedding is so bad that if I didn't have flexible working options, I wouldn't get any washing done, because I wait until the power comes on and quick, go and get some washing into the washing machine. And I'm very much not anti face-to-face. You know, I think that face-to-face communication is really important. I think it's fantastic for relationship building, but what works for one company, one individual may not work for another. And really it's about those options and that flexibility. And people want, you know, those options as well. You know, people agree that they would love, by and large, they want that flexibility of where they work. So, you know, in terms of, I want to maybe work from a co-working space or a coffee shop, and then maybe I'll go into an office. But also when as well. If you do your best work between the hours of, say, 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and would like a couple of hours between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. to see your children before they go to bed, if you're in the situation where your work allows for that, then you should be empowered to do that. And there's lots of other, you know, personal well-being as well. I don't know who likes to go to gyms here, but going to a gym at 8:30 in the morning is a very different experience than going to one at 6:30 in the morning, where you just have to wait in queues to actually get onto a treadmill. Expanded job opportunities. I think this is a huge one, actually. Given how much talent we have across the continent, people don't have to look for jobs in their own backyard anymore. There's opportunities for talented people anywhere in the world to get good jobs from companies also located anywhere in the world. And it's about having that autonomy over your own schedule. Because I always say there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's no such thing as work-life integration either. I don't think that exists. There's just life, right? And work is a part of it. Cost savings as well, potentially, not always, but if you don't have to spend all that money on petrol to commute, there's often some cost benefit there as well. So it's good for individuals. What about businesses? It's great for businesses, it looks like, as well. If you want the very best people, you want those high performers, then that talent pool is everywhere in the world. It's not just in Silicon Valley. It's not just in London. It's in Nairobi, it's in Johannesburg, it's in Accra, it's everywhere. Potentially could reduce your overheads, not paying for really expensive rent. Less misconduct as well. That's a really interesting one, actually, because I was just reading something on this yesterday. It's the European Financial Management Journal have found that rates of financial misconduct among traders were 5 times higher for those that were in the office versus those at home. And now there's similar research going on for other industries as well. And diversity is such a big one. There's now research to say that women are now entering the workforce more quickly after having children, so they've got more flexibility. And there's a well-cited McKinsey study as well that looked at exec teams, and they found that executive teams with higher ethnic and cultural diversity were 36% more likely to have above average profitability. So it's good for individuals, it's good for businesses. So what went wrong? Why are we all being told to pack it in and get back into the office? And what happened, I believe, and I think this is a really multifaceted issue, but what happened, I think, is that in our haste to move to this remote working situation is that we started trying to recreate the office online. And the outcomes of this have been pretty bad. Just to talk about a couple. The first one is bad productivity, poor productivity. And that's one that's everybody's saying, you're not productive at home. And when we look at productivity, I don't think that this is caused by distractions around the home. It's not your cat jumping on your keyboard. It's not even people sitting on social media all day. What's happening is, one of the reasons we liked working remotely was because we got that headspace, we got that time to really do deep work without these constant interruptions of people coming past our desk, asking for 2 minutes of your time. And it's never 2 minutes, saying, let's go to the break room and have a piece of cake because it's so-and-so's birthday, whatever. But we've replaced that with other things like Slack and email and Teams. And so these are now the new people coming past your virtual desk. So that's a challenge. Other cited challenges: overworking, so people not having that boundary, not being able to switch off between work and the rest of their lives, and that's also a challenge. And I think there's cultural issues there, but the big one that I want to talk about today is this one: disconnection. People are feeling lonely. People are feeling isolated because of that lack of human contact. And in the office, this happened automatically, right? You just could chat to people without even having the intention of chatting to people. And we've tried to recreate it in things like Zoom coffee catch-ups. And, while it's better than nothing, it really, it's not shown to really improve engagement or change isolation all that much. Working remotely, it's easy to feel disconnected from our leaders, disconnected from our other team members. even disengage from things like our organization's values and, you know, the vision, the mission, that deeper stuff that actually motivates us as human beings. When you're in an office, you often have these physical reminders around you. You have, you know, it seems to drop into conversation and exchange a lot more. And one of the major challenges, I believe, is the technology we're using. You know, the technology, our tool stack that we're using. And I'm going to talk about specifically video calls today, not because it's the only thing, but I think it's a good example of what we've learned to lean on. And while I may be a little bit critical of our use of video calls, I don't necessarily mean it's totally bad. This is about expanding our tool stack and recognizing what the issues are and choosing a technology that works for that. So you may have been told during video calls that you need to turn your camera on, right? So that people can connect with you. And I get that. People who don't like speaking to a blank screen. I can't see anyone now. I've no idea whether you're sleeping. Like, you know, there may be no one there. I could be speaking to a screen and I'm all by myself. So I get that. I do. And it makes sense. But actually, the research that's been done originally by Carnegie Mellon University, and there's been some others since, has shown that turning our cameras on during group conversations on things like Zoom or, you know, Google Meet, whatever you happen to be using, it actually lowers our collective intelligence. And there's a few reasons for that. One is this issue of vocal synchrony. You know, you can't quite tell when somebody's going to be speaking, and you don't have those cues of when somebody would like to interject. And so you either end up speaking over each other, or there's a lag, or, you know, there's various issues there. Also, we tend to rush into getting down to business on a call, right? We have this thing where you get on, you've got a half hour, and you want to be respectful of people's times. So you go, okay, we haven't got much time, so let's get started. When in actual fact, I've started now being really quite deliberate in taking a good few minutes at the start of these calls to talk to people. I want to know the human beings behind those job titles, especially when I virtually never, and pun intended, virtually never meet these people in person. And, you know, I want to know, you know, how's your daughter doing at ballet? How's the training going for the marathon you're doing? I want to know these real things, because these are the things that really help us connect and understand each other as humans. And these things eventually show in your bottom line. You know, when you've got a good team, you've got a high performing team, when these relationships are strong, this is what really makes a difference. So, you know, you've got a video call in front of you, you've got this like Brady Bunch weird thing going on, and you're trying to, it's distracting, right? You don't really know where to look, and it doesn't feel very human. And it doesn't feel human because it's not, right? 2D screens were never designed as communication technology. They were designed as display technology. And somewhere along the line, we got lost and we lost sight of this. And this, as you may now have guessed, is the segue into talking about virtual reality and talking about it specifically for internal communication in this workplace collaboration, and how I believe that this is the way to go. Once again, I'm not imagining everybody sitting with sweaty face computer on all day, every day to do their work. This is about using the right technology for the right challenges. And I'd like to walk you through what I call the 3 magic eyes of virtual reality to explain why I think this. So the first magic eye is immersion. So this is a big one, obviously. Now, immersion is a beautiful and very complicated thing. In fact, that I've so far devoted around 2 years of my PhD research into just defining what it actually means within the context of workplace virtual environments. And we've traditionally looked at immersion in relation to things like gaming environments, to a lesser extent, social virtual worlds. But the workplace is different. And, you don't necessarily have that narrative element of the game. And narrative and storytelling in and of themselves are actually quite significant parts of this immersive experience. So where do we start with the workplace? Well, without getting overly academic, there are a few debates with regards to how we can actually define this. The first one is immersion as an objective state or immersion as personal perception. So are you automatically immersed when you put on a VR headset? Or could you be just as immersed doing something else? That's the first one. The second one is immersion's relationship with presence. All right, so presence as the feeling of being there, and co-presence as the feeling of being there with somebody. So is immersion required to feel presence? So when you're immersed, are you there automatically also experiencing presence? Or is total immersion the same as presence? That's another argument that's out there. The third debate is whether realism impacts how immersed we feel. And it's shown that we can feel really immersed in spaces that aren't photorealistic. But while we think about visual elements of realism, realism may also be to do with sound. It could be to do with expected tension, real world, and the physics that governs it. So that's a really interesting one, the realism debate. The fourth debate is around flow theory. And so flow is that sense of really being in the zone. People often call it like, I'm in the zone. That's when you're experiencing flow. And there's research to say that virtual reality can actually elicit feelings very similar to flow, particularly around what we call shifts in temporal perception. Put plainly, and in non-academic speak, that's like losing track of time. And this is such an interesting area, and I'm not going to talk about it today because it's not relevant to my point right now. But next time, we'll do a whole thing on losing track of time in VR and why it's happening. And spoiler alert, we don't actually know. There's some ideas. But the final debate is around levels versus types of immersion. So is immersion on a sliding scale? So where you start with, say, disengagement, you go through engagement, engrossment, and end up in being totally immersed? Or is it more about types? Is it more like about psychological immersion, sensory immersion, mental, physical, emotional immersion? Or perhaps it's a bit of both. So I could debate all of these all day. But for today, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the presence co-presence argument, because this is very relevant for what we're talking about here. Now, there's only two ways to feel present. The first is actually being physically present with someone, and the other one is in virtual reality. And they're now seeing that brains kind of activate the same areas, regardless of whether you're physically present or present in VR with somebody, you're experiencing co-presence. And this suggests then that co-presence is actually, it's a real phenomenon, and it has measurable impact on the brain. Also interesting is that MRIs have shown that in a virtual reality environment, in a sociable virtual reality environment, your amygdala is actually less active, it's underactive. So the amygdala is a tiny little part of the brain, but it's responsible for processing fear and threatening stimuli. So fight, flight, think about that kind of thing. And this could suggest then that using VR is a really quite powerful way for those with social anxiety or perhaps that are just shy to get used to interacting with others in an environment that their brain tells them is less threatening. So that's the first lot. Now, the second magic eye is interaction. So when we look at interaction, we're talking about how we can manipulate things and in our environment that just aren't there, right? They're not really there. And this is really important for collaboration for teams, because especially ones that are designing physical objects, because you when you think of designing something, you think about it in 3D in your head, and the final product is 3D. But everything in between ends up being this strange 2D scenario. So we're visualizing them again on a flat screen. By using VR instead, we can do this in real time. We can do it whilst being present with people, discussing things, manipulating and co-creating. And there'll be a brief case study on this one shortly. The third magic eye is imagination. So VR, it gives us the power to do anything and be anywhere, regardless of whether it exists in reality or not. So you might want to speak to someone in another language and see that translated above their avatar's head. You might want to do your brainstorm from a melon sailboat floating in a bowl of ramen. You know, it's as good a place as any. And this is, you know, all possible with virtual reality, which can really help with creative brainstorming, with creative collaboration for the workplace. But with all of these possibilities that VR is affording us, our virtual workplaces, a lot of them still tend to mirror our physical ones. And there is a psychological reason for this. It's called structured imagination. And it means that we tend to rely on existing paradigms when we create things. So I've used the example before about asking people to think of an animal that doesn't exist and be as creative as you can be. And structured imagination will tell me that even though I've told you to be super creative, people will still think of an animal that has eyes of some kind and legs of some kind, or at least limbs. And this is because we're relying on models that already exist. And it's our brain being efficient, if you like. And it's the same when we're building these virtual workplaces. So we think of an office building as a building. You know, it's got a roof and it's got chairs and it's got desks and boardrooms. But we don't need those things in the metaverse or in virtual environments because, you know, there's no precipitation. We don't need a roof. There's no floor. We don't need chairs with legs or chairs at all. And the problem with recreating things like boardrooms is that we know they're not conducive to creative collaboration. We know that people don't really enjoy them. Like you're not like, so where do you want to go today? Oh, I'm going to go hang out in the boardroom. Like it's just not what we do as humans. And futurists in future studies, it's often called the used future, and it's something we just keep doing even though we know it doesn't work. And we really need to start challenging these paradigms when we're talking about creating new spaces for us to work in. So I'd like to go through a few case briefs. I'm not going to talk too much about training scenarios, partly because there's some really good ones already, like Kabir earlier was talking about training situations. So I'm going to try and focus a bit more internal comms, employee engagement, collaboration. So this first one looks at computational medicine. It's a company called Nimbus Therapeutics, and they're developing the future of medicine, basically. And they were originally using 3D platforms, but on a web-based computer, and looking at how they could really show and demonstrate molecular structure designs. So it wasn't really working for them because it was very restrictive. They couldn't really see the detail. They couldn't zoom in properly. They couldn't manipulate and change. VR enabled them to do that, right? So the VR enabled them to get into a space together with these 3D molecular structures and be able to look in minute detail of what's happening. So that's a really first one that I find really interesting. Next use case is improving cultural sensitivity. And this is for the healthcare industry. There's been a few examples of this, but the healthcare industry was an interesting one for me because the bias perceptions can really have a bad impact, a really negative impact on patient care. So you've got people coming in from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Everybody has some kind of inherent bias, and it's looking at how we can counter that. In this particular scenario, they had two characters. One was a Syrian refugee who didn't have very good English, and another one was a Black pregnant lady who had a history of opioid use. And the outcomes of doing this and really getting people to understand these individuals and their backgrounds it really encouraged this compassion and empathy that can only be better, only make patient care better. The next one is one of my favorites, virtual company retreats. And this was Trello, awesome company, and they're remote first. They couldn't always get the full team together. You know, it's really expensive to fly hundreds of people around the world and get them all in one place and put them up in hotels. It's prohibitively expensive for many businesses. And if you're going to do it, you're not going to do it all the time. I personally am a huge advocate for doing in-face kickoffs. So, you know, depending on how you work as an organization, maybe quarterly, at the start of the quarter, you get together in person, you do a bunch of strategy, bunch of KPI planning, all of that stuff. And then you go out into and have a bunch of fun. You have loads of fun. And then you can go back to your individual places of origin and just focus on getting the work done. But anyway, coming back to this, they wanted to get together more often. And, you know, there was a huge period of time where we couldn't as well during the pandemic. And they brought everybody together for a tour of the virtual office, just a bunch of fun, some mini golf and little things like this. You know, this is a much cheaper than flying people around the world to get together. Next one is on co-working collaboration. This comes from a creative agency called 5x5. And they wanted to see, so the first problem was that they had people commuting in every day and it was wasting a lot of time. And they wanted to see if they could work remotely more often, but keep a human element to it. They didn't want to lose that vibe that they had in the office. And so that's what they did. They decided to do as much of a lot of their work in a VR environment. And that was everything from just co-working, just working next to each other, having some music on in the background, chit-chatting. And if you read this study, and it's done in a really cool way, they're a creative agency, so it's a very creative case study. They just keep coming back to this point of like, I really felt like I was there. I felt like I was bonding with my team members, even though I wasn't, you know, even though physically we weren't together. And the other thing is that they're a creative agency, so they want to see their work beautifully, and having it at this IMAX scale and being able to do videos and animations is so much better than just having it on a flat screen in front of you. So much more immersive. And that's me for today. I just want to say before I open for some questions and things, I just want to say a big thank you to Tatsuya Tanaka. So all of these gorgeous pieces of art in the slide are done by this Japanese artist. He does one every single day, which is incredible. So do check him out. And thank you to you for coming here. And thank you so much to Immersive Tech Africa for bringing us together. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me there. And yeah, thank you much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joe. Amazing insights.
Yeah, amazing session as always. I mean, obviously, we talk about from IEEE perspective, advancing technology for humanity. I think you made a beautiful point around what we can do in the immersive space, and the fact that what we should be doing is bringing together solutions for people. Sometimes we lose track of that. So I really appreciated that in the presentation. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Like, we love technology, but we also love being a human.
I know I do.
So I remember you asked about if some of the audience are working fully remote. We have some responses. Additional is saying fully remote. We have Mamadou is saying hybrid for me, mostly remote. We have Kylie Smith from Atlanta, currently working in a hybrid workspace, which is quite good. Right. And we have a question also. We have John who shared a feedback regarding load shedding, right? So you can totally relate to that. And then we have David who dropped feedback, I think. I'd imagine that more modes and accuracy of the senses, the more immersion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Because there's, that goes into the kind of like the sensory immersion idea, and there's because haptics are getting so much better now, there's more research being done in that area. So I'm keeping an eye on it.
Great.
I love the
Thank
research
you
that
so
you
much.
shared too about the idea, Joe, that we really do register belonging in the virtual space, which I think is fascinating. I'll have to look up some of the studies that you mentioned. Those were great.
Absolutely. I'll share those with you. So feel free to share with your community on LinkedIn or whatever. I'll share the research.
That's fine. I'll reach out to you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and you. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Enjoy
Joe.
the rest. Bye.
Bye-bye. Great, guys. I guess we're moving on quite well. Thank you all for listening.
We
Next
could
up
spend these
is
sessions forever. It's all so great,
yeah, it's
Amazing speakers.
Yeah, we have Valentin. He's in the backend already, and he'll be talking about his product, Greybox. And I'm adding Valentin to the stream right now. And hey,
Hi, Valentin.
Hey, hi everyone. How you doing?
how are you? Good,
We're
good.
well.
Pretty good. I got back from Ukraine a few weeks ago, so still getting used to the jet lag. So if you see me hesitating a bit, blame it on the few hours of time zone shift.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
No worries.
Are you ready for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Perfect. I'll start the timer. I'll try to respect those little 15 minutes to resume. Perfect. Hey, hi everyone. I want to talk to you about a project that we started a bit before COVID, but that got even more important around COVID. First, a few words about what we do. We kind of specialize in the idea of making digital content accessible. And of course, when you want to make digital content accessible, the content that people are interested in, things like videos, VR, interactive experience, they're really, really heavy, right? They consume a lot of storage, and that's pretty much the title of the talk. So why should you listen to me for the next 15 minutes? First of all, I have about 10 years of experience in management and communication. I actually did my master back in the day, especially about this kind of use of VR and different kind of interactive experiences. In so many ways, what we see now started from the early days of the old prototypes of VR, etc. And we'll talk a bit about that. But the angle I'm putting here is a bit of the social impact. Technology is fantastic. I heard, I think the case of Joe was really interesting of technology in itself is not enough, right? You have to think about the human element. And the last few years, I can say, was definitely spent on that. I took about 10 years working in media production. It led me to travel in West Africa, Latin America, to do projects involving multimedia and video. And I'll give you a few hints on how you can maybe learn from our mistakes when you deploy your own projects. So what happened? In the last few years, we traveled a lot in the context of different humanitarian missions. We did educational missions. And there's definitely one element that I keep hearing over and over again, which is the work we can do, let's say, in the middle of the city, can take months to do in the field. And what I mean by field is when you're in the villages, when you're trying to make those fantastic experiences suddenly be accessible in a school environment. And be mindful about the fact that maybe you love VR and you can show it to someone, but if you go back home to your city and the kids that you show it to, they cannot interact with it anymore, you know, maybe there's an element of like, how can people still enjoy some of those experiences, even when they don't have all the nice tech, right? And that goes to the idea of digital divide. Half of the world, and this is the last stats from United Nations, half of the world did not connect to internet in the last 3 months. And I think it's safe to assume that, you know, 3 months before that, they were not watching, a 4K 360 video experience, right? So that's the state of connectivity here today. We talk about VR, I absolutely love this. But we have to keep in mind that connectivity issues are quite important. And I come from Canada, and I was quite surprised when I went back home that even half of our rural communities or population don't have access to basic internet speed. There's different ways to calculate that, but the way in Canada it's calculated, to give you a reference, is 2 people trying to have a Zoom call in the same family. right? That's kind of the limit for a lot of rural populations. So you can guess what's going on in some other countries. It is not fantastic. So think of your own technology, of your own startup, of your own project, and then you look at that case and you realize, oh, how can I make sure that it stays accessible? I want to show you one of the projects we worked on. We pushed a lot of volunteering time. We're a nonprofit. We pushed a lot of volunteering time. We pushed a lot of internship time to develop this little box. This is a picture we took in Morocco, actually. And here's one simple example we did. There was a cool project with Park Canada. Park Canada is the organization in Canada that is in charge of all the national parks. For those who've seen Canada on the map, Canada is one big park, essentially. And they had this fantastic, interesting media experience, but guess what? There's no internet in the park. Not just there's no Wi-Fi across the park, because that's way too expensive. The cell phone network doesn't reach that place. So regardless of your media experience, it just doesn't work. So what we did is we deployed a bunch of those little devices that you've seen. Actually, we now have a slightly smaller version, something small like that. And what it does is that it creates a Wi-Fi hotspot, same way than when you create a hotspot on your cell phone. But if you have 20 people who connects to your cell phone, you know your data is going to vanish and it's going to cost you a fortune. Instead, what we do is when people connect to that device, they have access to the internal memory. And what we did with Park Canada is we actually loaded the entirety of their video experience in that device so people can access it from their phone. Right. And of course, the fun part of having something so small is that you can put it in a kind of weatherproof case and deploy it anywhere. We did a project recently in Madagascar. They were working in a national park. They had a lot of content that they needed to access. And again, how do you do that when you don't even have electricity? Suddenly you have to think about those elements. A device like the Quest is actually surprisingly power efficient versus what we had just a few years ago where you had a whole rig with a computer, right? But how do you run it over a long period of time, right? So whatever you work as a solution, think about maybe if internet is an issue, electricity might be an issue too, right? And another part that we discovered is that when you run those projects, especially if you try to sell them in the school or something like that, maybe have a way to measure the impact, qualitative, quantitative. What we did, for example, in our device is we put a little analytics. So it can tell you how many students connected to the device, for how long, what kind of content did they watch or interact with. Why? Because you ultimately have to justify why that activity is better than a static video or just any kind of alternative experience, right? For example, we can even have HTML5 games here, or kind of think of those like Mozilla VR experiences, things like that. We can host that on the device. Anything that doesn't require crazy amount of back-end kind of processing. So what we do is we take all kind of content. We can put the entirety of Wikipedia in it. We can put VR videos. We can put, I see more and more teachers kind of use Moodle and try to tie this up with other experiences, etc. It's very flexible, right? Think of that as a ridiculously cheap server. And when you do VR content, of course, you can preload some video content on those devices, right? You can put, usually most people, what I see is they buy about those 64 gigabytes or the cheapest device they can get, right, for those VR experiences. But quickly, for those who run those in those scenarios, you know that people always want more content. And those libraries are super heavy. So be able to load more of that content so that any VR headsets can access that, download it, and use it locally, means that you don't have to make that switch yourself. We deployed those devices in about a bit more than 12 countries now. I just got back from Ukraine, so I'm probably due to update that map with a few more dots. But essentially, we run it from schools to absolutely rural areas. And it works great because you create something that can be purely autonomous. You can have the most fantastic multimedia experience. If it forces you to rely on resources and infrastructure that you cannot find in the environment, you're gonna get stuck. And we definitely had that experience a few years ago in our first VR project that we deployed across Quebec, and we learned you have to be autonomous, right? So you saw in the previous slide, we launched a bunch of those. So as a nonprofit, those devices, we sell them close to the cost price. A nonprofit, an NGO never tries to make money, but you try to see what we're trying to put as a case is something of it has to be ridiculously cheap, whatever you do, right? Ideally cheaper than a phone. This is in Canadian prices. To give you an example, this is about, let's say, 100 euros, to give you something in between. And something that's important that is often forgotten when you do those kind of technological projects is that, is there a monthly fee, right? Once you buy the device, if I need more content and I have to pay on that content because there's some sort of recurring where that content is online in the cloud and I need a good internet connection, there's monthly fees that are occurring. So maybe you have funding for a 1-year project. What happens once there's no more funding, right? How do people keep accessing that content? So for us, we went from the simple approach of, there's one device, you buy it one time, and then you load as much content as you want. You can connect a USB key, or SD card, and preload gigabytes of storage in it, and it will be accessible. By default, there's like 64 gigs, but again, USB key or a SD card, if you connect it to that device, you can expand your library. And actually, it's kind of funny because in some regions, there was a fun experiment they've done in Amazonian jungle, where they actually tried to see what's the fastest way to transfer data. And they picked up a few pigeons, they loaded them up with a SD card, so the payload was an SD card. And in the village, they tried to download the same content using satellite, internet connectivity, and etc. Now, they lost half of the pigeons, but overall, because those pigeons were able to transport a lot of gigabytes at the same time, those SD cards are super cheap, they were able actually to have a better and cheaper transfer rate than using cell phone or satellite connectivity. It's an extreme example, I'll give you that. But if you're working in VR, boy, those files are big. They got way lighter, but there's no way around 4K content being heavy. In countries where they barely can stream sometimes 360p content, right? So, for example, we use 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi on those. In theory, it's 300 megabytes per second, but in practice, we get something closer to 150. That's definitely better and certainly cheaper than what you can have with a cell phone. To kind of recap, we worked on a device that we realized it has to work with what people have. So by using Wi-Fi, suddenly we can be compatible with all kind of VR headsets that have a browser and have Wi-Fi. We're even compatible with cell phones or just a computer, because not all VR experiences necessarily require, not all kind of 360 or VR experiences require a headset, right? Some of them can be done on computer. Some of them are actually using a cell phone through those kind of cardboard kind of approach, right? So use wireless, super cheap, power efficient, whatever you have, especially if you try to demo it around or you do school projects, make sure electricity is not a problem. We made it weather resistant and in general, just because those things travel, right? VR headset, I remember we always had to package it like crazy. But overall, even those devices here, they travel a lot. So think a bit about that element, and portable too. Nobody wants to carry, a ton of load with themselves and be super heavy. And one last thing that we often tend to forget when we excited by the media element is the impact assessment. I spend too much time in my life running after teachers or people doing workshops to say, hey, how many students, how many people tried that cultural projects, etc. Right? And nobody's working in that field to work on Excel sheets. So if you have ways in your media experience, we definitely done it with those little boxes to actually track. Stay compliant with the usual privacy laws, but just to know how many unique users for how long, where did they actually click on. This is super useful, and it kind of helped justifying the project. One thing we look to, and again, I'm sharing a bit of a use case here, is don't reinvent the wheel. Between you and me, we didn't plan to actually start doing that. We work a lot with nonprofits, giving them training and digital skills. And the first time somebody asked us about, hey, we have connectivity issues, is there a way to make our files accessible offline? Probably that exists, right? Everybody's online. And when we start looking at the number, what we saw is there's a lot of very cool solutions out there, but they're usually very expensive. They require IT skills. Sometimes it's almost like industrial, kind of military almost type of approach. And hey, I just want something that a teacher can use, right? An elementary teacher, right? Most people in the world are not technical users, right? And it's okay, right? Most people in the world are not video editors or media content creators. So you have to design something that is super easy for people to use. And we actually even partner with some organizations, right? We're a supporter right now of Kiwix that you probably see here in the list. So if you work on a project, look at who's already in that space and just collaborate with them. It makes the whole thing nicer. And maybe because of that approach, keeping kind of social impact, keep the cost as low as possible, be super transparent about how we do things. Over time, that actually led us to a pretty nice space where we got a lot of news coverage about what we did. And it was important because we're a nonprofit, we're an NGO, and have recognition from our peers, other people that are actually also in this space. Well, it's fun, right? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It feels good. It allows us to get more funding and grants. And the purpose here is just to share a bit of that experience we had, so you can probably consider that with your own project. Of course, if you want to partner with us for a project, if you have also kind of too much content for your capacity to deliver it in some areas, if you want to make sure that people can access autonomously that content, get in touch with us. And if some of the things that you learned through that little kind of use case are applicable to your project, talk about it in your team. Make sure that you can have social impact when it matters. And also that it's not just a fun, geeky project or not just a fun, artistic project, but that other people can build on it. There was an impressive amount of funding that went into fantastic media projects, but that nobody can carry them in the future. So I think we have a responsibility to make sure that when we create something good, people can still access it. That's it. So 15 minutes plus 7 seconds extra. Sorry for that, Roma.
No, it's fine. We're actually overboard by time. But thank you so much for sharing. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts before we
well, lots, but I won't take up too much time. Valentine, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it is incredibly relevant for a great deal of the world with regards to the challenges that we face with infrastructure challenges and everything else. I know Joe talked about load shedding in the last session. So just kudos to you and the team for all of the work that you're doing. I know that others will want to reach out to you and learn more about how you're helping to address some of these challenges that many of us face on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. I heard you mentioning a bit before IEEE. I think we're gonna, for one of our projects, there's a very cool initiative called Connect the Unconnected that happens every year, and we're probably gonna apply for the next version of it. But those projects are important to share because tech plus social impact is a ton of fun, honestly. So yeah, if that can inspire people, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please, I think you should. I think you should definitely apply and share the learnings that you have with the rest of the world, because we're all trying to deal with very similar challenges.
Yeah.
So.
I want to give an example. I think Robin gave a case when you film in a setup. His case was kind of extreme, right? A jungle and such. When you film projects and there's a community involved, it's important to be able to reshare back that content. Right? So not only what you film, right, but how can people keep accessing that content? I think a USB key is a minimum. Something like that makes it even more accessible. But if we can share the love of VR and multimedia, I think we have to try.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. All right, cheers. Great. Yeah, moving on quite fast, and I love his solution. Right, very, very impactful.
Yes.
And up next we have Kevin, who has been patiently waiting in the background for his own session. I hope you guys are having an amazing time. Please, if you have any question for any of the speakers or any of the projects, please drop them in the chat. I will be happy to share them with the speakers. I'll be adding Kevin to the stream, and he'll be starting immediately because we are a bit short of time. And here is Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Good. I was having audio issues at the last minute, so sorry I'm on my headset here.
No worries. Well, Kevin, I know you've got a lot to share with us, and I know you're working on some pretty important projects. So without further ado, we'll just hand it over to you and let you get started and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on.
Okay. Uh, Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you guys are at. Uh, my name is Kevin Owens. I do work at the University of Texas at Austin, but I'm going to present this in outside of that realm. The main thing that I wanted to convey is this idea of competency-based experiential learning, which I think applies very well to XR, as you'll see in this brief. So, like Jennifer said, I have a lot of stuff to go over, so I'll see if I can get it in within this amount of time. The other thing I just want to mention on Jennifer's behalf is some of this work I have also been contributing to IEEE, and I think a lot of this is also being addressed through those various projects that are going on. So yeah, there's a lot of good work going on here. So let me get started here. First off, I do have a Slido account started. So if you guys would like to interact, we can do that. I think I've turned on the presentation, and you guys can respond to it. Just use the QR code here, or go to that website and type in that number, because these will have a lot of relevance to the discussion I want to have um, relating to how this is going to be applied to XR. And I'll let you guys have a chance to write that down if you don't have a camera to, scan the old QR code there. Okay, so first let's just talk about the baseline, how I see it right now. One, how we educate today, it's basically the same thing as we've been doing in the 18th century, even before that. A controlled process, short time frames based on Carnegie units, which really don't translate to anything measurable in terms of learning. The scheduled, instructor-centered sort of approach, kind of like what you see in these pictures here, which are very focused on the idea of pedagogy, which is great for young children. In fact, pedagogy is about teaching children. But in reality, we need to focus more with especially secondary and post-secondary education on andragogy, which is more about focusing on adults. And of course the single media approach, right? Chalkboard, Vatboard, PowerPoint, kind of like what we're doing here. And what we need, which is what we're talking about here, is immersive, more individual experiences and processes. The other thing is there really is no single policy, at least here in the US, on what is the purpose of education and training. Is it for technical skills? Is it for academic accreditation? Is it for improving society? That's kind of what we're asking you the questions of. But it's going to make the difference on what we can actually and what we should be presenting in the classroom. So consider that. But at the same time, it also explains why we have the chaos and all the other little government interventions going on in education today. The other thing is education really doesn't have a quality check. We do these check sheets based on short-term measures of test, and which encourages cramming for tests, which really is probably the worst way to learn, because all it does is it stimulates short-term memory. It doesn't really help with the long-term memory transfer. So if we really wanted to check quality, we'd be asking the people who are receiving this education, that is the occupational industry or government or whoever it is that's getting these people who are being trained, what is the standards and what are the measures? Instead of what the professor thinks or what the school district thinks, et cetera. And then finally, education is focused on rewarding with grades. And again, this is based on these short-term ad hoc sort of examinations. And yes, there's some formative stuff going on in there, but ultimately you're walking away with a grade, and failure is discouraged or it's even punished. In fact, kids will drop out of classes because they failed grades instead of understanding they're learning from those failures. In fact, failure is probably one of the best teachers we have. So all of that said, that's kind of what I'm trying to address here is this baseline. So first, Some of you probably understand or know about experiential learning theory. If you don't, it's been around since the early 1900s. All these fine folks here on the left have been part of the academic, not only the academic research going into it, but actually have created institutions using this process. Uh, the latest in the line, Mr. David Kolb, who's credited with the experiential learning theory term, um, is sort of standing on these shoulders of these other giants here. But on the right, you can kind of see the process where you're giving people experiences, you're working off the reflective capabilities of humans and how we learn. Because what humans want to do is they want to learn to prepare themselves for the future, to survive, to be part of a social construct, to advance and to aspire, not just necessarily to regurgitate what someone else has told them. So that's the basic idea of experiential learning. So we're working from this, and we've done some research in my other more academic and other work to show that that there's something to this. The other part of this model that we're going to talk about is competence or competencies, and what are those? It's getting to the point where we just call it the C word because there's so many different authors who use this. I will mention that IEEE has started a standard to try to make this a single policy of what is a competence and what is competency and how do I incorporate it. I think it still needs to evolve, especially as we start incorporating synthetic environments and in mixed reality. But the originator of the whole idea of competence, David McClellan back in the early 70s, the idea was to distinguish someone's ability from that of grades and from academic achievement. Because in a way, not everyone has a chance to go to college or to go to Harvard or to even go to school in general, but they still have ability. So how do you measure them if they don't have grades? And so that was the general idea, how the whole C word started. But what we've done in our little corner of the world is identify competences as this non-biased, asserted state of a team. It could be a role, a job, a person does, a task, but their expertise and their capacity, and most importantly, it has to be done in a given condition and context. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. The point is, it's not based on what your grades are, though that could inform it, but it's just a part of it. Competencies, on the other hand, there's other terms for these: tasks, skills, knowledge, whatever, but they're the elements that make up performance. And what they do is they sum up to provide disability, whatever the context is, whatever the job is, whatever you're trying to do. And I want to add that, while a lot of education is focused on declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge, the one that's not really covered well and is probably most important is that of tacit knowledge, which is you can't, I could not transfer to you or explain to you tacit knowledge over this medium. It's something that you have to experience yourself, and it's something you have to generate yourself. So how do I give you, whoever, the receiver, the learner, the ability to build that tacit knowledge from my experience? So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And what can competence be? Well, it can be binary. It could be quantitative, meaning it's a probability, which is one thing we're researching, as well as qualitative. I mean, I can put you into a bin, a state. So those are the big ideas going on behind the rest of this talk. I'm not going to get too deep into here. You guys can look this up on your own. I've put in some references in most of these slides. Knowledge obviously decays, but we can reduce that decaying by boosting it or using what they call the testing effect. And context will make a difference as well. How we learn it, what we learn it in, and where. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Skill decays, no different. Surgeons, the medical community has noted this for years. The motor memory, how well we do things with tactile Ability has always been an issue. And again, these are things that mixed reality can help us with, albeit we probably need a little bit more maturity in the technology, but it's getting there. And then the other thing is long-term learning context. Um, this is what I call the surf and turf experiment, which is this idea of context-dependent memory. And what it basically showed is that where the environment and the area that people learned material in, they were better able to recall it, use it when they needed it, when they were in that same environment. And you can look up this research on your own, but the point is, the real measure of learning is recalling it. It's not necessarily just storing it. And the idea is, context matters, and that's one of the things that's critical as mixed reality gets involved in this process. I should also note that motor skills require that tactile feeling that goes with it, and there's also emotional components to this as well. So if you're not feeling good when you're learning something, it might not be as easy to recall it when you're in a different mood and you're trying to use it. So, and then the last thing this is just some supporting data to what we're going to talk about here in a minute, but is this idea of task difficulty, or what they call, I'm sorry, I'm destroying it. Guadagnino described as the challenge point theory, or challenge point hypothesis. And what that basically means is to increase your probability of success, you really need to match the degree of difficulty, but it has to be difficult. It has to increase in difficulty as you're giving them stimulus, and it can't just be the same thing over and over again. And part of this is, and this is very related to, for those who know zone of proximal development, it's very similar. It's the idea that I need to have the difficulty I'm ready for, but just enough so I fail. And it's failure, especially in the early part of the learning process, especially for adults, where you need to adjust that. And it's really hard to do that when you have fixed content like what I'm doing here. But when you have mixed reality and you have control over the variables of the stimulus, you can adapt that accordingly. And so that's one of the things that we're also trying to incorporate into the competence measure, is how hard were you able to perform these tasks in the past? Because a lot of times what you get in school doesn't necessarily match the difficulty you're going to get in the real world. The other thing I just want to mention on here is you hear the word reps and sets a lot, which is kind of from the weightlifting perspective and building muscle. And that's fine. It does require repetitions, but it can't be the same repetition. And that's one of the things that the learning science has shown, that you need some deviation in that stimulus, or else all you're going to get good at is that one stimulus that you got, that same context over and over again. Where in reality, what you're trying to do is prepare yourselves for things that you might not even know is going to happen. So here's the question: how do we bring these occupational standards or real work experience and context into an institutional education? Here in the U.S., we have a capability called ONET, which is ran by the Department of Labor, and it's basically it's a central site to not only inventory all the occupations that are out there, but also there is some work in there to try to create these competency frameworks to focus on. What hasn't been really matured as much is how do we measure those competencies consistently, so and produce the common metrics and measures and evidence that someone has that competence. And that's part of what the work is that we're trying to do here. But at least it's a framework, at least it's a start. And it's openly accessible. I provide the link here, and you can kind of see what that involves. But the idea is, could we use this as a common framework for not only education, but how we transfer education into training and into the workforce, into industry or into government or whatever. And that's really the focus of the research that I'm doing in other projects. So here's the idea of competency-based experiential learning, or CBEL as I call it. One is you have to define a context of interest to the learner. And this could be, again, from the secondary education student to post-secondary. Let them try out these different occupations. Let them see what they're interested in. And then only provide the kind of instruction that they need just to get them started. They don't need to know everything like what we do today. We don't have to blanket them with all the topics and all the subjects and all the theories. Give them enough to get them to at least get them involved in the experience and make them a little dangerous so they can do what they need to do. But then you also need to incorporate other resources they may need as they're in the experience. And this is where an adaptive learning system works really well. And that's one of the technologies that we're working with along with mixed reality. And you can, this is, in other words, another term that these go by are intelligent tutoring systems, expert systems. This is not new. This has been around since the 1970s at least, but it's getting better. And the whole idea is to have the adaptive learning system support the teacher in not only presenting the experience, but providing just-in-time micro-learning, if you will, and then also to collect the data, which is absolutely necessary. That's a whole other topic in itself, but we have to collect data, which mixed reality allows us to do. So we have the evidence to show that, yes, you did well, you did at expectations, better than expectations, or below expectation. But then also to give them the feedback and to allow them to observe others or to get the perspective of others on them, so that this all feeds the ability to reflect. And reflection is just another way of recalling information that you learned, which strengthens the neural connections. That reflection is probably one of the most important things in learning. And then that, as well as time. And then from that, we can also come up with ideas of how we can make ourselves better. And then we start again, or we get more instruction as we need it. But the point is that, it is a continuous cycle. And that's what I'm kind of showing here. So the idea is you're going to continuously go through these experiences, which could be real. They should be real as possible. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But they're going through this cycle, and all the time you're collecting data. And data is absolutely critical to this process, because it's what's going to basically give you the validity that your competence is what it is, however you measure it. I also note that you're kind of going to follow an S-curve. And there's other work that's gone on that sort of shows that this follows very closely to how other biological growth occurs in life. Plants, for example, they follow this sort of S-curve or sigmoid. And yeah, the size, the height of that curve will increase as we get more technology and our abilities as humans evolve. But we're still going to follow almost the same process. And obviously at the top it levels off, but that's where deliberate practice comes in, and where we can actually start, excelling beyond what the typical normed performance or competence is. And that also needs to be captured in some way. So that's the general idea of CBEL and how it would execute. The other thing I didn't talk about was this idea of spaced repetition. As you kind of saw back in the forgetting curve slide, where Ebbinghaus basically said, look, your knowledge is going to drop off, but if you keep going back and testing on it or reflecting on it, you're going to retain it better. Well, it's the same process here. Today, as you can kind of see at the top here, we kind of go through this these series of topics in a very asynchronous process, whether they're terminal objectives, that are topic syllabi, items, and then we get this final exam. And what we do at the beginning sort of doesn't get brought up until we sample it at the end during these exams, or at the end of that module, that unit. in a CBEL course or in an experiential learning course, the theory is I can break these things up into these small sessions of experience, and they can be on different topics, meaning I can interleave these from whatever your session period is, if it's weeks or if it's months or if it's a few days, whatever it is. But the point is to give the knowledge or the skill or the competence that you're trying to develop a time to rest, a time to reflect, and then to bring it up again later. And you can cover the same topic span and scope, but you're just doing it in a different way. And how we do this would be through interventions and adaptations that the adaptive learning process would provide us, as well as the immersive experience, which allows us to do a lot more in a more concentrated, intense fashion than trying to do it through reading a book or watching a PowerPoint slide like you're doing here. So that's the general idea. And the process we want to use is, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, but it's the Littner system, who was a German scientific journalist in the early 70s. And he was doing this from the perspective of using flashcards. What we're talking about is, instead of flashcards, we're talking about these experiential events that would be presented through a mixed reality context, or it would be live, and you're able to adjust the sequencing based on what you're getting right and what you need more work on. And so it would fit a very similar process. So one of the key things here is using real experiences. And what that means is I need to record, and I don't have to do this all the time, but I do need to record. Almost think about, like here in the US, we have police with body cams on it. We all have cell phones. The ability to record data today is ubiquitous, from cell phones, like I said. We can have things in the work environment. We can have screen capture. We can have other things like that. And in some cases, we're not ready for this kind of data collection in some occupational areas. But like in medical, we can certainly record things that are going on in the hospital, or in the military is one of the areas that I'm working with. But the whole point of that is, if I can record those events that were tragic mistakes, or even these spontaneous points of excellence, I can now recreate them or avoid them in the future. And if I can then convert those into a synthetic environment, where I can present them either through a 2D screen or a mixed reality, a more immersive screen, it's going to become even more important. And I can apply all the typical declarative and procedural knowledge along with it. And I can reuse these. And key to that is I need to save these off in some sort of format. What we're using is this thing called an experience object, very similar to the learning object that was used back in the day of early, if anyone's aware of the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative. That is something that the American DoD system is sort of focused on. And I think IEEE is also supporting in the standards. This is the ability to capture real experiences, which are not only used to capture it, but is to help teachers and others use this immersive technology by automatically configuring both the learning environment, the synthetic environment, but also these adaptive learning systems, which today are really hard to set up. So that's the other point of this, is to make it easier to use these experiences, just like you bring up a PowerPoint slide. And the type of mixed reality we're talking about is anywhere from first-person gaming to obviously augmented reality, but also anyone who's followed shows like The Mandalorian, which is an American service series based on Star Wars. That entire show is presented within a synthetic environment, and that's kind of what you're seeing here in the top right. Everything that you see in the background is being done in a synthetic Unity, I believe they're using. synthetic environment. So they can get the real lighting, they can get the real effects, but everything is synthetic around them, and you don't know the difference when you're watching the show. And this is kind of where we're going in the future. Some of the work we're doing with some of our colleagues on campus are following the same thing, using motion capture and other technologies. So it's really exciting, but we still have a ways to go in this, and I think it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how this comes out. And then the last thing I just want to go over is so there is this matching that needs to occur. And so where does mixed reality fit into this? So if you agree that, you know, these competence levels exist, that you have, and you can call them what you want, but I use novice or atrophied, meaning someone who's was competent but hasn't done it in a while, to apprentice, or someone who's just practicing, trying to get good at a specific task or a specific job. Proficient meaning you're in the professional realm where you can kind of do things without any help. And over on the right, by the way, is the zone of proximal development, just to sort of bring that in. It really depends on how much outside help you need to really tell you where someone is in this competence level. But then you get up to the master level, which kind of gets left off the radar in many of these taxonomies. And this is where people want to be better than others, and that the aspirational part. And that's certainly should be something we should track as well, to pick out those stars, the star players from the normalized crowd. So in our approach, we see mixed reality as being sort of the beginning, the ability to really rapidly build that experience necessary. So when they go into the live environment, into the real work environment, they're better able to react and they're better able to learn in that case, because training in live, whether it's on the job training or stuff like the military does, where they have to set up these elaborate ranges, is really expensive. And you cannot get the kind of repetitions you need as you can in mixed reality. So that's the general idea here. And I'm trying to respect my time here. So the last thing I'm just going to talk about is this idea of what I call the WHO model. And it kind of gives the idea of how we could track competence based on these various factors that I've brought up. One is, how well have I done in each of these experiences? And notice that this isn't pass or fail. This is, did you perform as expected? Did you perform better than expected? Or did you perform less than expected? And that is really going to be dependent on what the data it is that you bring back. So it's very dependent on data. The other part is, how hard was those experiences? Did you always work at the easy level, or did you actually ramp up and get more experience, more difficulty, more challenges from the more novel conditions? All that's going to increase your ability to be more, the predictive ability for you to perform in the future is going to be better. And then the last one is, how often have you done it? If you haven't done it for a while, obviously that should degrade your state, because again, I showed you we decline in our knowledge and skills atrophy over time if we don't use them. So anyway, that's the general idea. We're recreating this. We're calling it a math model, but this is some of the research we're doing, and I hope to have something to share later on when we continue this, when we have something ready to demonstrate. So in general, what we talked about was the quality of education today isn't very effective. At least that's my observations and the data that I've looked at, especially in the workforce, is my point. And how people learn best is through his experience, which isn't really necessarily, there's education out there that does put people in the environment. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not the general model. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't have a general policy, an agreed to policy of what education and training is all about. The other thing is, instead of tracking grades and GPA, we really need to track competence. I know that has been attempted over the last 20 years, but it has evolved into these models like, if you ever heard of competency-based grading, it's like, okay, you got the competence part, but you're moving it back into grading, which isn't helping. And to be fair, we didn't necessarily have the technology to do what we can do today back then. So maybe we should give that another look. And then education and training really needs to focus, on a standardized set of standards and measures outside of the institution itself, because otherwise all you're training people for are those particular centric values and knowledge and skills, when there's a whole world out there that can actually apply, improve those measures or improve those standards based on the lessons they all learn. And then finally, this is what the Seabell project is about. It will involve experience, mixed reality, but it will also involve live training. And the whole idea is to try to bring this into the institution and to promote competence over the grade-based outcomes. So with that, not sure if I went too long, but I'm open for questions at this time. Sorry.
That was great, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Selfishly, I love that you're sharing some of the work that we're doing on the IEEE side to bring about the standards to help tell the story. And what really resonated a lot for me, and I hope did for our audience as well, is that we've kind of come to this point where we've recognized that grades and GPA and where you went to school and what degree you have kind of is sort of irrelevant to how well you can do your job.
That's right.
And so I really appreciate you sharing some of this. I think it's very inspirational. I think it's also inspiring to hear that no country has got all of this worked out, right? We're all working on it together and working on the standards to help promote this. So this is a great time to start to learn about the standards and use them, because it really can be a substantial differentiator for our colleagues going forward.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was happy, and I thank you for inviting me to this, because I want to make sure this gets out of the ivory tower of academia and it is out there, because I know there's other great work going on around the world that is welcome to try the same thing or to add to the idea. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Amazing insight, I must say. Thank you so much for sharing, Kevin.
Thank you.
Great. Up next, we have Salman, who will be sharing his own thoughts on XR, the built-in browser of the digital era. And I'll be adding Salman to the stream. So after Salman's session, we'll be having a recorded session that will be streaming by Dirity due to some logistics issues she had. She will not be joining us live, but I'll be sharing her recorded session, and hopefully we'll round up with a session by Judith on how XR can transform education. So I'll be adding someone to the stream. I hope he's ready for us.
I think he is.
Hello.
Hi, man. How are you?
Salman.
How's everybody doing?
We're doing well.
Are you ready for us?
It's wonderful. Yeah, of course I'm ready. It's wonderful to be here. I'm so happy to be here. And honestly, Kevin gave a great talk.
Yeah.
Really loved what he had to say. And I hope the rest of the event is as good as Kevin's talk. All right, let's go ahead and do this.
Okay, cool.
Fantastic. Turning it over to you.
All right. Social media platforms are becoming browsers.
I'm sorry, Salman. Are you sharing?
No, I'm not sharing anything. I'm just going to go ahead and dive into the talk. Just a genuine conversation.
Great.
All right. Social media platforms are becoming browsers. No, like, for real. The algorithms that we once trained to show us what we spend most of our attention on, interact with, and look for on these platforms will soon allow us to look for whatever it is that we want on them. Back in the day, if you wanted a t-shirt, you would go on to Google or Bing, search top quality t-shirts in, say, California, for example, and you'd get page after page of e-shops and options. Before that, you'd turn on your car or call a cab, maybe wait at the bus stop for the daily 5:30 to arrive, get downtown and walk through the streets, stopping at each shop to see if they have what you're looking for. And the way it was for our grandparents, you'd book a visit to your local tailor and explain to them what you wanted, what color you wanted it to be, and what you wanted it to look like. And if you were lucky, they'd get it just about right. Over the years, what we shop for has changed, and human behavior has arguably changed with it. The reason I used the analogy above was to show a pattern, a consistent pattern that has been moving in the same direction for ages. As we move forward in time, options are increasing exponentially, and with that increase, technology is enabling easier access. There's one main problem we do have in the digital world at the moment that still gives the edge to brick and mortar shops. Do you know what it is? My guess is most of you know it very well. The problem is that you can't try out clothing items, for example, in real time through your screen. You can only choose what you think your size is, and 1 to 3 business days later, the items are delivered to your doorstep, ready for you to try them on and determine whether you made the right decision or not. Quite a hassle. It's the same cycle for furniture, decorations, accessories, and anything else you buy off a virtual portal, also known as the internet. But what if I told you that is going to completely change in the next few years? Would you believe me? Or call me a madman? Hear me out. First of all, let's start by giving XR the shortest definition possible. XR is the umbrella encompassing immersive technologies and AI. To go into a little more detail, it is the umbrella under which AR, VR, MR, and AI live in complete harmony. But what does this have to do with anything? Trust me, it has everything to do. Now that we have a primary idea of what this combination of technologies is, allow me to show you what it will pave the way for. In the future, the bulky, heavy VR headsets that are currently in fashion will be replaced by much more sleek, minimal glasses that are much more powerful, much more accessible, and much less expensive. What about our phones, you may ask? For anyone who doesn't want a pair of glasses to link them to the virtual world, soon enough, LiDAR technology will become a standard on most phones, meaning that you can accurately access the virtual world at the swipe of a screen. As things stand, AR and MR are currently looking like top contenders to create the bridge into the virtual world, given how frictionless they are, and with them being less virtual than the 75% immersive VR headsets we have today. Now, whether it's the first or the latter, add AI to the mix and a team of powerful software developers, and you can virtually solve any problem out there through immersive technology. Soon enough, immersive technology powered by AI will take over the social space. Remember that clothing item you couldn't try on through your screen a few minutes ago? You will now be able to try it on in your mirror. Just pick the item, pick the size, hold your phone up, and the AI will run a one-time biometric scan, allowing your AR or MR device to show you whatever it is that you wanted to try from the comfort of your bedroom. Remember that couch you wanted to get from IKEA that you weren't sure would fit in your living room? AI will scan the room you plan to furnish using LiDAR technology and give you accurate dimensions. In addition to that, it'll show you exactly how the item will look like in that exact same room in real time. Same thing applies to the new chandelier you always wanted to buy. and the accessories you'd like to add, and the carpet you're not sure would fit the color scheme you agreed upon with your interior designer. Most of the things I just mentioned above are either under development or in full effect. That's right, there are currently apps you can download on your smartphone that do that. Crazy, right? Now, what does this lead to? For starters, easier access, less friction, less hassle. Companies will have less returns and higher customer satisfaction, leading to higher profit and better ratings. All by default, just because they use an immersive technology app that is powered by, you guessed it, XR. Now remember how we were talking about algorithms and how they were getting a lot smarter and more capable. Well, the hundreds of searches people make on Google every day will soon be made on social media platforms, which are getting much more intelligent and much more personalized. Add to that a layer of immersiveness just a few years later, and what you now have is the ability to not only find what you're looking for, but see, try, and experience it, all from the comfort of your screen. Planning a nice casual outing? You can look up your favorite restaurant and take a virtual tour inside. Sit down on the table of your choice, look at the view to your right, not to mention see all the tasty meals that are on the menu right in front of you in real time. Planning a trip to the Alps, but not sure where to stay? Look up hotels there and enter their immersive portals. There, you will have a fully immersive walkthrough. Your MR glasses or phone screen will allow you to experience the hotel as if you were there. You can go to the several facilities, have a virtual drink at their cocktail bar, and even walk through the several rooms they offer until you find the one that works exactly for you. All that's left would be for you to book on the available date, get on the plane, and get going. Now, let's say you want to learn a new craft online. All you have to do is prepare the materials in front of you, put on your MR glasses, and follow the step-by-step tutorial on how to create the perfect pot, or maybe even your favorite piece of origami. Feeling like shopping in the streets of London, but just don't feel like going into the shops? Again, using your MR glasses or phone, you will be able to see what each item would look like from the barcode on their window, which allows you to make the decision of whether to go in or not. The possibilities are endless. There have never been more industries included by a technology. Do keep in mind, however, that these technologies can be extremely dangerous on human behavior. Following the pandemic, humans are much less social and will probably be less social in the next few years as we see everything getting digitalized. When people have or can have anything they want from the comfort of their couch, they don't need to go out, drive, or even move much. They become slaves to the digital world, a virtual utopia that is more dystopian than anything else. With all that comes increased obesity, decreased focus spans, increased depression, and worst of them all, an increased risk of what I like to call contextual anxiety, which is a phenomenon we will be seeing more and more of in the next decade. This form of anxiety is the result of isolation from reality. It is led to initially by a person's detachment from one's real surroundings and actual reality. To keep things short, the risks associated with the digital era are endless, but so are the opportunities. What is being created is beautiful. It's breathtaking, in fact. But the fear is that what we will soon have will be so frictionless to humans that it could become of friction to humanity. Companies working on XR need to keep that in mind when they create their products. They need to start incentivizing users to go out and socialize. They need to make these people do what humans have always been doing and push them to rest their minds in the world, away from the chaotic realm of anti-reality. Only by doing that can we limit the risk while also unlimiting the possibilities. Thank you, XR Innovation Summit, for having me, and a big thanks to Arom Ibrahim for putting this together. It's always lovely to get the opportunity to communicate the future vision of where the world is headed and create value for the community. My name is Salman Halawi. I am an entrepreneur, futurist, keynote speaker, and founder of Meta Designers, a Web3-based services marketplace aimed at connecting brands with trusted Web3 service providers. I look forward to being part of the next initiative. Until then, let's stay in touch.
Great. Thank you so much, Salman. Yeah.
Cheers.
We're wondering if we have any questions from the, okay.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well.
So I have a couple of questions though, Salman.
All right.
Though you gave some amazing thoughts and insights on especially how brands can leverage on maybe WebXR, for example, right? How do you feel in terms of the next phase of e-commerce, right? How can small businesses, and we're not looking at the top brands, how can small businesses really get started with XR, if possible, focusing on WebXR? Since most of them have websites, they have e-commerce platform. What are some thoughts or advice you feel small businesses can deploy to get started with WebXR?
All right. Great question. First of all, and I think whoever is going to make this is going to be very rich. I see that in the next few years, there's going to be an application or a hosting, XR hosting app, just like Shopify, but for XR, wherein you've got shops coming in, paying subscriptions, getting a barcode on their perhaps storefront if they're brick and mortar, if not inside of their accounts, leaving a portal, which takes people into an app. And from that app, you can access a clothing item, have your AI scan your body biometrically, and you can see the clothing item right on top of you, or inside of your room, or you guessed it, you see it. Whatever the item is, you get to see it virtually as if it's in real time wherever you want it seen, whether it's on your body or inside of a room or inside of a space. So the possibilities are unlimited. And I believe that a subscription model for such an application wouldn't be too expensive for small brands. And I feel like that's the most feasible approach they can take instead of just developing their whole thing. Because as we know, small e-commerce brands and little brick and mortar shops here and there, they don't have the budgets to create something big with XR. I mean, at least with the fees on the market at the moment.
So the goal is not just how amazing the technology is, but how we can really onboard those businesses that would really have a very huge impact if they're deploying any form of the XR technology. Jennifer, you have any questions?
I think more just a comment. I think some of our previous speakers were speaking about, what is the metaverse, and no one's really sure what it means and all of those kinds of things. And I think your talk is relevant in the sense that, once again, what I see is the ability for us to connect to one another, to objects, to experiences, to opportunities, to whatever, in a very different way. And I think, your talk kind of illustrates that, right? The ways in which we can actually connect, engage, experience beyond just the static 2D that we're used to. So it is amazing to think about. One of the things that I always say too is, if anyone tells you that they know for sure what the metaverse is going to be, they're not being honest, right? Because we don't know just yet exactly what it's going to look like. I appreciate though that you're kind of drawing that out, right? It will be another way for us to connect. It will use technology we have today. It will use technology we don't have yet.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you encouraging us to think beyond kind of the platforms and technology that we have today and think about the ways in which we might engage in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Jennifer. And I completely agree. At the moment, there's no such thing as an expert on the subject matter. What we can agree upon is that we're currently cumulatively visualizing and sharing thoughts as to what it could lead to, what it could be. And we do have the infrastructure, or we're coming up with the infrastructure now with the fast-paced world we're living in, to actually reach a point in the next 5 years, for example, where we have a fully interoperable metaverse. And I feel like people are really rushing the concept of the metaverse a lot. It takes time. Good things take time to build. And it takes a lot to just grasp everything and come up with something that doesn't deteriorate humanity, but rather moves them forward.
I love the mention of humanity, and I also love the mention of interoperability. Right? I know that that's an area of concern for us all as we continue to work in the space. Is how we do work on interoperability and ensure that the person at the end of the day, no matter what platform they've experienced something immersive in, or what that content was, or whatever, they're the same person, right? So if we're not capitalizing on the ability, even from a data perspective, like Kevin was talking about before, to actually be able to say, these are the experiences someone's had, and these are the skills that they might have built, regardless of what engine it's built in or what hardware they use, we're really going to kind of miss out. So I think you're right on in terms of that comment. Interoperability is key, and that's hard right now. While we're all kind of in the beginnings of the space, but super exciting as we start to look at how everyone's coming together and working on some of the things that maybe aren't as cool from the end user perspective, like data standards and things like that, but definitely something that's needed for the technology really to advance humanity in the ways that you were talking about. So thank you for that.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jennifer. Any other questions?
We have feedback though. We have Sariki saying amazing talk.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your insights. We have Rico KD saying on point, amazing talk also. And we have Ryan who also gave feedback on your talk and also said it was amazing. So well done.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for putting this event together. We need events like this, events like XR Innovation Summit. We need events like Gatherverse. We need events that bring people together, that talk about and take on topics that are not being talked about or discussed enough in the space. Yes, this is a potential multi-trillion-dollar industry. But at the end of the day, what we're building for people. We're building for humans. And with that being said, we need to remember that whatever it is that we build has an impact. So that's just a small reminder to all of the AI companies out there, to all of the AR companies, to all the metaverse companies, to keep the end user in mind whenever they build. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of
your
your
evening.
Cheers.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Great. Amazing. He had a lot to share, and I'm glad he's focused on the users, how we can actually empower the end users with the amazing tech, XR. And we'll be moving on happily to our last, second to last session, if I'm correct, by Dirity on how XR in education and training, enhancing learning through immersive experiences, right? So I'll be sharing a recorded version by the Riti. Sadly, she could not be with us, but I hope you guys are able to also enjoy her amazing insights and experiences in regards what she's doing with XR in India and her thoughts on the future of how we can fuse this technology in education and also training. Right. So please permit me to share the recorded file.
I'm Riti Chatterjee, the Managing Director of Distribution. I'm from India and working on XR and Metaverse. For the past 15 years, I'm helping entrepreneurs with our super advanced customized IT solutions, and XR is a part of them. I would like to thank Immersive Tech Africa and Arom for inviting me to this XR Summit. Today, I want to take you to an exciting journey by discussing how XR can enhance learning. In Distribution, we are experimenting with a bunch of young students, those who are cooperating with us for a long time now. They are helping us with their time, excitement, and feedback. We are observing how they are reacting to our simulations. And then we are creating this kind of XR simulations. So very soon, Distribution will come up with an educational platform that will be the XR enabled educational platform that will serve the students of not only India but rest of the world. So for me, XR is like a magic wand that unlocks a whole new world of learning opportunities. Let us quickly discuss that how XR can help increasing learning capabilities. The first thing here I want to discuss is the immersion. XR immerses us in realistic and interactive environments, making learning more engaging and more memorable. I hope everyone who is present here would be agreed to me that instead of just reading something, the reading material or a book or a school syllabus, or maybe about our historical events, if we can step into a virtual world and witness them in a first hand, that will help us to remember those things for a longer period. XR enables experimental learning, where we learn by doing. We can simulate scientific experiments, practice skills, or even explore new places without leaving the classroom. Isn't it amazing? It's like having a superpower to explore and learn from anywhere. I mean, no technology other than XR can help us doing this. I hope you are with me so far. I really wonder that how XR can bring out endless possibilities in education. There are so many things that XR can enable in learning. Like XR helps us visualize complex concepts and ideas. We can see 3D models of anything, like maybe molecules, planets, or architectural structures that allow us to grasp difficult concepts with ease. It's like having a magic lens that brings abstract things to life. So for me, XR plays a very significant role in, learning. But today I want to discuss not only these benefits that, helping students learning through XR, but I want to discuss something more. These are some common benefits of XR that we have discussed so far, but currently in this division, we have taken a leap. Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to explore the remarkable world of XR and discover how this technology can revolutionize the way we learn. Yes, XR has the potential to enhance our intelligence in various domains, including IQ, EQ, and DQ. I would like to take you into real-world examples and case studies, how we are experimenting the application of XR in these fields. Imagine stepping into a virtual time machine where history comes to life before your eyes. One such case study took place at our institute in Reservation Academia, where our students explored ancient civilization through a VR simulation. By virtually walking through ancient cities, conversing with historical figures, and witnessing pivotal events, these students developed a deeper understanding of the history and its impact on the present. How beautiful is this? Now tell me what we are doing through this. We are actually helping these students to develop their IQ and helping them to grasp those subjects faster and efficiently. Just see this bunch of students, they were with us for last 1.5 years, and we are helping them with our exam simulation that we have developed. We are helping them in their studies, and we are studying their reports, their feedbacks, through which we are coming to a point that at what moment their understanding getting deeper, at what moment they're exploding their emotions, at what moment they are feeling overwhelmed. Remember, the ability to visualize complex concepts and abstract ideas is very crucial for intellectual growth. We did experimented with students using XR to explore molecular structures. By manipulating and observing molecules in a virtual environment, students not only grasp intricate scientific concepts, but also developed critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Can you see how we are helping them developing their personality also? What is IQ? It is a measurement of the cognitive abilities. So if someone can respond in a better way, if someone can, understand the subject, grasp the subject in a better way, then we can understand that the IQ of that person is growing. We have a student called Arav. He was very, slow learner. He was not able to grasp the subject very well. His teachers always say that, Arav, you are very slow. Other students are learning faster. You are not able to learn fast. And Arav has gone into depression many times. His mom told us, I want to help my child, but I don't know how. We told her, please let us help Arav. And today, Arav has completed the course that we have designed for him. He is able to grasp any subject as fast as his other classmates. I know you might be having so many questions in your mind. I would love to answer all your questions, and I would request you to mail me all the questions so that I can answer each and one of you, because this subject is something that is very close to my heart. But before going to the questions, I just want to complete this one. Other than intelligence quotients, there are 2 other questions that XR can help develop these 2 as well. So in addition to IQ, XR can nurture EQ, which pertains to emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. We all know that if we could be empathetic, then we can help millions of people in this world, and we can make the world a better place to live in. Our students got engaged in an AR project where they assumed the role of diverse historical figures. By experimenting history from different perspectives, students developed empathy and gained a deeper appreciation for cultural diversity. Let me take an example. In 2022, there is a huge refugee movement from Myanmar to India. If we can create an XR simulation of that refugee movement, and we can show that to anyone, that can create a huge amount of empathy in their mind, and thus the urge for helping mankind will be evoked. Not only that, XR also plays a very significant role in developing DQ. What is DQ? When I was discussing this with my team before starting the experiment, Many of my teammates ask me, ma'am, we have understood about IQ and EQ. What is DQ? DQ is digital quotient. No wonder that future demands digital literacy. And XR provides the ideal platform to cultivate these skills. We all know that internet is not space, digital world is not safe. How you can make yourself safe in this digital world, how you can train them effectively. Your lecturer PPT is not going to help them. We have implemented XR to simulate a real world professional environment. Students owned their problem solving and decision making ability by navigating virtual business environments, practicing negotiation skills, how to use internet effectively, how to stay away from the predators, and managing complex projects. XR empowered our students to become adept digital citizens, equipping them for the challenges of the digital age. So I don't want to stretch my discussion anymore because I know many eminent speakers are on the panel and they are waiting for their sessions. Even I would like to learn from them as well. I just want to sum up whatever we have discussed today. So XR, the frontier of immersive learning, has proven its potential to elevate students' intelligence in multiple, domains. Through XR, students can embark into captivating educational adventures, fostering intellectual growth, emotional intelligence, and digital literacy. So these are four main points that I wanted to cover today. From historic time travel to molecular manipulation and professional simulations, XR offers students unparalleled opportunity for discovery and development. Let us embrace the power of XR and unlock the doors to intelligence and innovation. Thank you for joining me to this enlightening journey today, where the fusion of technology and education leads us to a new horizon. As I already have told you, I would love to take all your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to mail me to dcvisionc@gmail.com, or else you can reach to Arome also. A big thanks to Arome and Immersive Tech Summit for giving me this opportunity to share the little path that I have traveled with X. Sir, I would thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for being there, patiently listening to me and learning with me. And I am also eager to learn so much from the other speakers. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, she did great. I really love her experience in terms of how they have been able to deploy XR, especially for education in India. The use case she gave about the guy and what so far the technology has helped to improve his learning experience. I would like to give like a use case as regard what we're also doing at our startup back home in Nigeria, how we are trying to empower schools, right, to transform the way they teach students by leveraging on maybe augmented reality for in classroom visualizations, and also maybe out of the classroom experiences whereby parents can use their mobile phones to aid the learning experience of the students, right? So I really admire her work, and I was wondering if you have any thoughts on her session too.
Yeah. So I think, as you've said, there's so much potential that's here. I'm such a big advocate for emerging technology and the ways that it can be utilized to really give people experiences that they may not be able to have fully in their current environment. It's so relevant to a lot of our colleagues around the world. And so I really appreciated her perspective on that, and the ways in which we can really, give people the ability to try on new skills for size, get better at them, and then hopefully get opportunities. I think about all of the speakers that we've had today, and they kind of all weave together into a story about how we do learn and grow and get opportunities, whether it's in agriculture, it's in a office setting like Joe talked to us about, or it's even out in the field in complex industries where people have to do all kinds of things with weaponry and all that kind of stuff, like we heard about from Kevin. I think it doesn't really matter, is what I'm gaining from today, what the industry is or what people need to be able to do. We have a great opportunity to be able to give them the ability to learn new skills and to be able to show those skills to the world. So beautiful talk, and just really excited to see what they're doing in India to support some of these things.
Yeah, that's true. So we're moving on to the last session for today, the first day of the XR Innovation Summit, and we'll be having Judith. She's already at the back end, and she'll be sharing her thoughts and experience on the transformational power of emerging technologies in learning. And I want to say a very big thank you to Judith for making our time. Right, I'll be adding her to the stream for her to share her thoughts and experience. So let's welcome Judith.
Great way to close the day.
Yeah. Hi, Judith.
Thank you. Hi, Arome, Jennifer. It's lovely to see you both. What a pleasure it is to be here with you all this evening. I'm very excited to be able to speak about a topic that's really dear to me, which is what these technologies can do for learning. All right, so I've got slides. Okay, here we are, they're up. All right, I'm gonna get started. Hi everyone, wherever you're watching around the world. I hope you've really enjoyed today. It's been a fantastic day at the XR Innovation Summit, and I'm really honored to be able to close it off this evening. Talking about something that I've been working on for a few years. And I'll talk a little bit about my experience and sort of like how I got to the point where I am, where I'm really advocating for this. My name is Judith Okonkwo. I am mostly based in Lagos, Nigeria, where I run what I describe as an XR creation lab called Immersive 3D. And our remit is to do really whatever we can to develop the XR ecosystem, so that's virtual, augmented, and mixed reality across the African continent. And we've done that in a few ways. Now, today's topic, I've kind of like gone on and on about how passionate I am about it. But I want to sort of like frame it in the context of this photograph, which is a picture from a school in a neighborhood in Lagos called Yaba. And it's called Jibo High School. The students are in the junior secondary school. So this is around about the age group of 11 to 13, most students would be. And this is a classroom that we transformed into a virtual reality lab. And we would come in and have sessions with the students and sort of like explore a bit more about how we could influence and improve their learning with this technology. But I'm going to come to all of that in a bit. To get us started, I wanted to play a video that we have at Immersive 3D that talks a little bit about who we are and what we envision when it comes to VR for schools. So let's see if we can get this playing. Oops. Okay. So just to pause here, it is possible that I'm not able to play video embedded in the slides. So I'll just try and do sort of like a quick summary of what this slide is. But I'll encourage you, if you're watching, please go and check out Immersive 3D's YouTube channel, and the video is there. It's called VR for Schools. And in this video, we just really quickly talk about what we do as a lab. Our remit can be categorized in three main areas. The first is what I describe as evangelization. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we let as many people as possible know what the extended reality technologies are. And for us, this is going out to engage with the public, but then also having a lab with an open door policy so that anybody can walk in, can inquire, can use equipment, that sort of thing. And really, we want to be able to give people their first touch and feel of the technologies. But above all, we want people, after they've encountered us, to go away knowing that these technologies exist right now, are here, and are relevant for them to engage with. The second focus area for us is in nurturing, growing, supporting, however you would describe it, a community of XR practitioners and creators across the African continent. I'm someone who personally has always really believed in the power of these technologies to transform everyday living. I think, though, that for us on the African continent, that's only realized if we have the knowledge resident on the continent, if we have the skills, and if we're able to build for ourselves and for the world. And so we're constantly encouraging people to come and engage with the technologies, to learn the skills, and to build. And then the third and final area for us, which of course is linked to why I'm speaking here today, is around initiatives where we feel there's room for immediate significant impact for society right now with these technologies. And for us, those initiatives have been in areas like education and healthcare and storytelling and in digital conservation. And of course, today we will focus on education. So I'm going to think through and talk through this transformational power in three ways. The first way I've already alluded to with the first photograph you saw, where you saw students in a classroom. And I let you know that that was from Jibowo High School, a junior secondary school in the Yaba neighborhood of Lagos. And that really is representative of our work around the VR for Schools program, where we wanted to think about ways in which we could use these technologies that really, I mean, think about the first time you tried virtual reality, right? These technologies that have this amazing wow effect, but can really go beyond that. And I know you've heard a little bit about the ways in which they can impact learning over the course of the day, but can really go beyond that to improve retention and to do so many more things. And for us, what was exciting was if you go to, say, the average public school classroom in a city like Lagos, it would be a really basic infrastructure. And what I mean by that is there'll be chairs, tables, maybe a black or white board, and that's it, right? That means that there aren't labs where students can go and do experiments. There might not be financial resources to do things like field trips and all of that. And for me, I kept thinking, well, okay, we know that there are all of these challenges. And, when you think about all of the things I've mentioned, also think about the fact that the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure for schools, right, has not kept pace with population in a place like Nigeria. So that classroom that I was describing with the chairs, tables, and a black or whiteboard will easily have 80 students, sometimes 90 students. How then can we say we want to get to SDG 4 and provide quality education for these students and start to give them the kind of experiences that they should have, that they deserve to have with the limited resources that are available? And that really has informed what in time has become this work on deploying this kind of technology in resource-constrained educational environments. So you might ask, why virtual reality for something like this? I mean, apart from saying why not, which is, that sort of like reactive answer, think about the fact that if you had a virtual lab, you could have students in that lab doing experiments over and over and over again. If it was chemistry, no need to keep purchasing chemicals, those kind of sort of like cost activities. You could take students virtually on field trips to the pyramids of Egypt and various other locations. Excuse me. You could take them even beyond our planets. They could go out and explore the solar system. They could go into the human body. Back in the day when we started this work in 2016, there used to be this great VR experience called In the Body VR, and you could sort of like navigate through different parts of the human body and explore yourself from the inside out. Imagine that. But I think for me, what's really exciting is that all of a sudden you get to create a situation through these virtual resources that starts to bridge the gap between the quality of education that you would have in an elite private school and what is available to students, the majority of students in the public school system. Very exciting work. And for us, in exploring this, I mean, we first started to go into schools in Lagos, Nigeria in 2017. And that was work where initially we would just go in taking content that was off the shelf. So experiences like In the Body VR, which I just mentioned, as well as a host of others that were readily available then on devices like the Samsung Gear VR. I mean, this was way back in the day, and later on the Oculus Go. And we would engage students with this, we would engage faculty and all of that. Fortunately for us, in 2019, we then got the opportunity to work with UNICEF's Innovation Fund, and we could be much more intentional about the content that we were taking to the students, because now we have the opportunity to work hand in hand with teachers in the school that I showed you, Jibowu Junior Secondary School, and actually co-create educational content that was specific to the Nigerian curriculum. And this was really exciting because we were able to spend a lot of time with the teachers. We went to the school, spent time observing them work, had a lot of conversations with them, but we also had the teachers come to our lab, spend time there, have them get hands-on with the equipment. And they were able to tell us how they think the tools can help. Because I think one thing that we very quickly learned was that we shouldn't go in with presumptions, right? We shouldn't go in assuming that we know the way that XR, VR, AR, whatever it is going to solve problems for the teachers. And that was a good thing, because for me, you know, going to one of those classrooms, I was completely thrown by the fact that there were so many pupils, everything was still being done with pen and paper. So it was a tremendous, tremendous amount of work for each teacher. And for us, it was key that when we were coming in, we were addressing pain points and we were saying, here are the technologies, how do you think they can help you? The teachers, of course, love to engage with it. Very quickly, they came back to us and said, well, we think there are 3 subject areas where we think this technology would be particularly helpful for our students. So they asked us to create modules for basic science, mathematics, and physical and health education. And for each of these, we created a module each, like a prototype. So we did something for potential and kinetic energy, we did something for algebraic expressions, and non-communicable diseases. And what you see on the screen here is a poster presentation of some of that work that we shared during the ILEARN, which is the Immersive Learning Research Network Conference in 2020. And this was just as, you know, as we were coming on to the end of developing those prototypes in 2019, and then of course the pandemic hit, so everybody was out of the schools, and that kind of put a pause on things. But it was just sort of like a recap of how far we had come along in terms of creating. So that process of working with the teachers, developing the content, going back into the school, which is the image you see there at the bottom, and testing with the students, and then taking that feedback and incorporating it back into the building for the particular module. The majority of students said that they enjoyed VR. The majority of students said that the experiences that they were trying out actually increased their interest in the subject. We still have a lot more research to do with this. We're very keen to be able to go back in the schools and actually carry out a robust study where we can gather empirical evidence about the impact of this technology, this tool as a learning aid, on learning outcomes. And so that's something we hope to do in the future. But even for the little things that it inspired in the students from the little time that we spent there, I think we're all very, 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 very excited about the possibilities and the potential. And also, given what we've seen in other parts of the world, really keen to be able to not just deploy this on the African continent, but also gather data to support its scalability further afield. So that's the first way in which I want to sort of like talk about the transformational power of these exponential technologies for learning. deploying technologies like this as learning aids in the school system. And these are school systems that might be resource constrained, but despite that, these tools, these technologies are able to provide a way in which we can leapfrog, what would previously have seemed like insurmountable obstacles. You're able to start to create these learning experiences that, even if we were to deploy our entire budget to education, we would not otherwise be able to do. All right. So we looked at formal education with a secondary school system. I want to now move from secondary schools to what I describe as beyond the walls. And when I say beyond the walls, really I'm thinking about outside formal educational institutions. But I'm also thinking about it pushing boundaries in lots of different ways. What does it look like when young people decide that they're going to learn despite all of the, sort of like challenges that they have and all of that? I think that we get to see that every day now as a benefit of the digital economy and the internet and all that it affords. And all of that affordance is, of course, I think particularly relevant in places, across the African continent where we've seen this tremendous sort of like increase in skill and aptitude when it comes to technology, and in that talent being deployed around the world. So for us, beyond the walls is us leveraging community and learning resources and having that available to young people wherever they may be, so that regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're studying formally, so you may be in school, you may be in secondary school, you may be in university, you may be out of school, but if you are able to access the resources that create access, like the internet and a device that allows you to connect to it, then there's this opportunity to deepen your learning when it comes to these technologies. And for us, that's very, very critical, because we have certainly seen the incredible power of that over the years. I'll give you an example of such a program that we've carried out recently. So last year, we ran a training program for about 3 months. And this was run virtually, so it was open to people all across the African continent. And they had the opportunity to sign up for this program and this training that we were running under the ARVIA Africa brand with a host of amazing partners all across Africa and Meta. And as part of this training, they could get on a Discord server where there were a host of curated resources for different aspects of the extended reality technologies. So for example, they could learn how to do virtual reality development with Unity, or they could learn about 360 videos, a whole array of resources curated, available for them. But what was really exciting is that alongside these resources that they could consume on demand, we were also able to have 7 instructors run guided sessions throughout that period. And this, for me, is really speaking to the beauty of the community that is being built, the ecosystem that's being built, because of course, all of these trainers came from the community. They taught their programs in English and in French, and were able to provide dedicated support to learners for that entire period. Now, I'm going to tell you a story of people who engage in that sort of activity and what it can lead to. Here are 3, what I consider, frankly, incredible, amazing women, some of whom, if you're fortunate, you might have come across already. So the first lady on my left there is Fahidat Abdul Salam. She's currently an XR software engineer at PwC. And I first came in contact with her a number of years ago, in 2020, actually, when we were partnering with the Lagos Business School to run an XR bootcamp. And we were running this bootcamp because we were working on a joint research project where we were exploring the use of virtual reality gaming and game design for the development of empathy and compassion in teenagers. And as part of that research project, we were going to develop a virtual reality experience. And being very pro the ecosystem, we wanted to do as much of that in country as possible. And so we decided to develop talent, and that was why the bootcamp happened. Fahida took part in that bootcamp. And then subsequently, I engaged with her when we were running another project at Immersive 3D, and she volunteered for us for a while as our VR developer. And she was someone who, over the years, I'd seen sort of like aggressively pursuing her acquisition of knowledge when it comes to these technologies. The program that I mentioned that happened last year, where we ran that training program over a number of months. Fahida took part in that again. So everywhere I would see opportunities for learning, I would always see her taking part. I know Microsoft also did something either last year or the year before around the MRTK kit for mixed reality. I know she took part in that too. And then this year, in January, very, very thrilled to see that she was announcing that she had started a new role as an XR software engineer at PwC. And for me, this is like an incredible journey that just shows the trajectory that's possible when we take learning beyond sort of like the walls, beyond those formal institutions, and make sure that everybody, today it's not everybody, but as many people as possible can have access to these resources and the ability to acquire the knowledge they want. The next lady, Chizarai Beakama, is an augmented reality developer, and she's someone that I first really noticed on LinkedIn. She's a student at a university, but she was just constantly kind of like telling stories about her augmented reality, what she was learning and how she was learning it, and showing that knowledge. And for me, that was just so, so exciting to see. I was fortunate to get connected with her and meet her, and she came to some of our events and has since gone on to sort of like contribute and share her knowledge at the meetups and all of that. So again, that whole ecosystem working where you see the community supporting itself and really supporting the growth of knowledge within it. And she's definitely one to watch out for the really exciting work that she's doing with AR. The last lady, Idiot Shiole, is a lady who describes herself now as the Metaverse Tailor. I first met her in 2019, and I met her, if you know Nigeria well at all, in the northern city of Kano. Now, even though Immersive 3D is headquartered in Lagos, we have 7 what I describe as mini labs in different states of the federation, and Kano is one of them, actually the first one that we set up a mini lab in. And that's where I met her when we were setting up that mini lab, because for us, we were really determined to make sure that we spread the resources for getting involved with XR and acquiring knowledge related to XR to as many places as possible. And we've seen a concentration of activities in a place like Lagos with our lab, but we definitely want to spread it as far afield as we can. Anyway, so I meet Idiot in Kano. She's there doing her National Youth Service, which is a mandatory year of service that Nigerians do after they finish university. And she was doing it with a hub there. And we've got this great picture from back in the day where she's trying out the Oculus Rift. And that's still like her first time going full on with a VR headset. Anyway, following that, sort of like the next year, she moves back down to Lagos and eventually ends up interning with us at Immersive 3D, which is fantastic. It was lovely to have her. Her degree from university is in fine art, and she's such a talented artist. And when she came to us, obviously very excited about these technologies, also very excited about fashion. And you probably get a clue from the title that she uses for herself, the Metaverse Tailor. And so she really started to build her knowledge when it comes to things like 3D fashion and virtual fashion shows and sustainable fashion, and has gained quite a reputation in the space. So much so that her work has been featured in different places, showcases run by people like Meta, and in various publications around the world. And I can tell you that right now, Idiot is in Germany, where she is spending 6 months with Adidas, and she's doing sessions where she's actually training their designers on 3D fashion and sustainable fashion. So such an incredible story and trajectory from all of the learning that she was able to acquire, sort of like beyond school, beyond the walls. And it just speaks to all of the possibility that is available to transform people's lives and, society in general, if we can make sure that this learning is constantly available to people wherever they are. The final area that I want to explore is universities. So I've talked about sort of like the formal school system, and with that, I was really thinking about secondary schools. So what you'd refer to middle and high school if you were in the States, for example. And then we talked obviously about what happens beyond school, and I think that is an absolutely critical component of learning. Even as we sort of like go beyond whatever stage you might be growing up as a child, through to what lifelong learning might look like for you as you progress through the years. And certainly, I think as we start to engage with all of the challenges around all of the advancing technologies and how we keep up, really, really critical. But now I want to bring it back to universities because I think they are a vital resource for advancing technologies, for bringing innovation to society, for developing economies. And I think that that's something that's very, very key for us to leverage. For universities, when I first started out, very ambitious, I was hoping that within a year or two, we'd start to see XR programs in universities across the African continent. That hasn't happened fully, but the good thing is that a number of these educational institutions, higher educational institutions across Africa are starting to introduce different XR modules into different courses, and that's a really, really, really great start. The image that you're looking at is from the African Leadership University in Rwanda. And I'm very pleased to say that our team was able to go there and set up our first AR/VR Africa lab outside of Nigeria. So that's been set up in the African Leadership University in Kigali. And for that, I have, as a follow-up, this slide with the big question mark. The question mark here now, because it's just been done. So this was set up in December. And we are looking forward to seeing what will be possible because it exists. But already at ALU, they're sort of like leading the charge in what they would like to do with these technologies and for their students. For example, they signed a partnership with Meta, where they provide training on Meta Spark, for example. They recently hired an XR instructor, who incidentally is someone from the community who was actually an instructor during the training program that I mentioned to you, that I mentioned happened last year. And so all of this possibility, all very exciting. For me personally, I think one thing I would say here about this is that the XR space, particularly across Africa, is really challenged by the lack of funding and resources to support experimentation. That means that a lot of people who get involved with the technologies are really constrained in just how much they can play. And I think in a lot of other places, you'll see sort of like a lot more freedom to be able to explore and to develop it. And that leads to all kinds of wonderful progression. I'm very, very keen to see a lot more R&D possible. And I think that universities are a wonderful place to incubate it, right? You've got students, you've got sort of like the academic expertise to support that. You hopefully got an enabling environment to encourage it. And with things like the lab, the resources as well to support that journey. So we're all looking forward to see what comes out of that. But alongside that, the firm commitment remains to be able to set up more of these labs in more universities across the African continent, and even outside, as I said before, of these formal institutions. So I've talked a little bit about the transformational potential of these exponential technologies. I do want to just highlight two further points related to that. One is that all of this, all of the learning, all of that potential for people to acquire knowledge, for people to use the knowledge to create solutions, for people to be able to really change their reality and ours, is founded on sort of like the ecosystem. I referred to it a number of times when I was speaking. And for me, the fundamental sort of like components of that ecosystem and building it, I've identified on the slide. So that's thinking about the vision, you know, really having a vision that can be shared with everybody for what we want to achieve, for what we want to have possible with these technologies for ourselves on the continent. The funding, of course, I recently just mentioned the fact that there's not enough money for playing, for experimenting on the African continent. And that is in stark contrast to the kind of spend that happens with XR in other parts of the world. And to give you context, one example I often use is the XR company called Magic Leap. That you may or may not have heard of. If you haven't looked them up, they have a mixed reality headset. And I mention them because to date, they've raised about $3.5 billion, right? In funding for the startup, 3.5 billion. And that number is especially significant for me because in the year 2019, for example, the entire African tech ecosystem did not raise that much money, right? It didn't raise that much money. And so when you think about that, and then when you think what there is to support XR, you know that a lot more work needs to be done, not just to sort of like bring people up to speed, but to even sort of like, you know, create a chance for equal footing to create the sort of things we need for the future with the technologies. Access, of course, access very important. Access to equipment, access to resources, access to everything. Another issue that is very, very critical for us on the continent, we need to make sure that headsets are accessible. That has been a challenge because they're not sold locally. Can that change? What will it look like when we build our own? So many questions to consider. And then, of course, sort of like encompassing everything, and really the glue that holds us all together, community. The incredible people that come together to make all things possible, you know, like we're seeing here with this summit and like we see with so many other initiatives across the continent. And finally, what does all of this mean? So whenever I think about the potential of these technologies to transform learning, I think about how critical it is for that to happen. And when I say how critical, I think about the fact that the average age on the African continent is 19. And with that, I often tell people that Africa is the workforce of the future, right? That in 10 years or, you know, 15 years, like sort of like the most productive continent, just because of the age of the workforce will be the African continent. If that's the case, then it then becomes especially imperative, right, that we get education right. I mean, we should anyway, but now it's doubly important. It's not just for ourselves, but it's for the whole world too. And what might that look like? What might it look like for us to be able to achieve, to realize the potential of exponential technologies for learning? I think in service of that, there must be a strategic agenda on the African continent for XR. And I think that it must focus on these pillars, on talent. That goes without saying, we've explored the talent bit a little bit. On policy, of course, we must find ways in which we engage with our governments. We must think about the regulatory positions that will encourage more people to get involved with these technologies. We must think about industry. Over the last sort of like year and a half or two, a lot of organizations have started to think about what the metaverse might be and what XR is and how they should start to engage. And you know what? Even though I would say, sort of like for the last few years, there's been this recurring question about XR and VR. And in 2016, it was like, is this the year of VR? Are we going up and down in the hype cycle? All of that. Despite everything, despite all the naysayers, despite the one day headline VR is dead, the next day it's resurrected, we're here. We're here. It's the 25th of May, 2023, and it's alive. Like virtual reality is here, and augmented reality is here, and mixed reality is here. And as far as we all can see, they're not going anywhere. So that spatial computing future is inevitable. And if it is, not just for us and our governments and our industries, then how do we make sure that everybody's ready and can participate? And what does that look like for organizations? Like, that's really important. Education as well. We've talked about that a fair bit, but what does it look like when we're not just sort of like educating with it and educating for it, but allowing it to help us create the reality that we want? And then finally, research and development. Really, really, really key. All right, so that's it from me. I just want to end with this final thought, this last question. And that really is that the future is ours to create, right? So every decision that we make around the technologies, for example, around how we will engage with them, around who we will support to work with them, around whether or not we'll use them in our classrooms, all of that is creating a certain future for us. And so the question will always be to all of you, what will you do? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. Amazing.
Amazing session, Judith. Inspiring as always.
Thank you.
I love it. It's a great call to action, I think, for all of us as we work collectively to continue to advance the space. So I think you've inspired a lot of people today. So we appreciate you being here. I know you're not feeling your best. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We feel honored that you were able to join us today.
No, it was my pleasure. I wouldn't miss it. Yeah, I really, really wanted to be here, and it was lovely to talk to you all. I don't know. Are there any questions or?
More or less
Okay.
applaud. We have Ryan saying awesome initiative, quite a lot of beneficiaries, and we have a lot of people clapping.
Oh, thank you. It's so good.
Yeah. So, and if I must add also, I think Judith has been fundamental and also instrumental to some of the amazing creatives and developers we have in not just in Nigeria but also across Africa who have started their journey with XR. Right. So on behalf of each and everyone out there that have benefited one way or the other from Immersive 3D and the Area Africa community, I want to say thank you so much for your support towards the ecosystem, and we hope to repay you back.
No, all of this is repayment. Thank you all so much. I mean, you all are the reason. Thank you.
I always say some of the most amazing talent comes out of those communities that you're fostering, Judith. So keep it up. It's amazing to see what's coming out of the continent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Zook saying is inspired, right? So everybody loves.
You guys are all fine. Well, thank you all. Thank you all. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you. I hope you have a really lovely evening or rest of your day if it's not evening for you yet.
We have, sorry, before you go, we have a question.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, somebody's asking, what are your thoughts on the future of the metaverse, which will be powered by? What are your thoughts on the future of the metaverse, which will be powered by AI? Are we going to lose talent?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I am so excited. So let me just kind of like take you back. One of the when I was first kind of like starting this work, I've mentioned like I've always been super passionate about the education piece, and there's this opportunity like TED did this talent I can't remember what it was, but it was a something search across Africa in 2017. So they came to Lagos and Nairobi and they were looking for speakers, and I applied to speak. And what I spoke about was VR for schools. And when I was talking about it, sorry, this is a slightly long-winded answer, but I will get to the point. When I was talking about it, what I was very excited about was, what I would in a way describe as the convergence, right? So we all know Nigeria, for example, has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. The numbers put at about 13.2 million or something like that. It's an absolute travesty, a real scandal. And with the VR for Schools program as initially conceived, of course, we're thinking about first going in to schools where we can work with the teachers to make sure we get the content right and with the students and have them validated. But for me, the most exciting part of this is that even if children don't come to school, at the end of the day, we'll get school to go to the kids wherever they are. School will go to the children. And the way that this will happen, and happen properly and happen seamlessly, is because of AI, right? Now we're all seeing like the really like exciting stuff with generative AI and all of that. And why I say because of AI is because even now as we're currently building, we're building contents, that is fairly straightforward in terms of interaction. But we're presuming, of course, that the students will still have access to a teacher, like physically, who's like supporting the learning in the classroom. At the end of the day, we'll come to the realization that, of course, not all children will have teachers in classrooms, and that perhaps some of these teachers will be virtual, and those teachers will be informed by AI. So I think that it is, and this is just one example, right? It is a very exciting future. As with all things, it is fraught with both potential and peril. It all depends on what we choose to do with it. Are we going to lose talents and developers? I mean, you know what? The real answer to that is it's up to you. You know what I mean? And let me tell you why. We're currently running a girls XR bootcamp with Innovation Girls. So we've got 8 girls in Lagos who are spending 8 weeks. They've all got Quest 2 headsets. They're all sort of like learning about the metaverse and doing sort of like 3D modeling and stuff like that. And you know one of the skills they're going to acquire? Prompt engineering. Think about it. Did that skill exist like 2 or 3 years ago? It didn't. So yes, some things will sort of like fade away, but as always, new things will come. And I think it just speaks to the thing about lifelong learning that I was saying. The choice is yours. What will you learn next? But there will always be work for people who want to.
That's true.
Well said, Judith.
Thank you.
It's kind of amazing when we think about how AI can enable us, right, as human beings, which we've talked a little bit about throughout all the sessions today. I love your response, right? It is up to you, right?
Yeah.
How do you want to lean in and be part of this and help create opportunities for others in so doing? So that's awesome.
Thank you.
More appreciations coming in.
Thank you. Thank you so
It's
much.
a great way to close out the session today.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I think we're done. About to wrap up the first day of the XR Innovation Summit, and I want to say a very big thank you to Judith for wrapping it up nicely. And we'll be going on the second day tomorrow. We'll be starting off with Dr. Morris, who will also sharing her perspective on how XR can also transform and redefine the way we learn, and also education for all. And I want to say a very big thank you to each and everyone that joined the stream. Big thank you to Jennifer, the team at the XR Innovation Summit, and the entire participants streaming from LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and feedback. Really, really appreciate it. And we're super excited and looking forward to the second day. Jennifer?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was a great day today. I'm still processing all of the amazing things that we heard. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So hopefully you'll all be able to join us again tomorrow. We've got a great list of speakers that we've already talked about. And it's get ready for another inspiring day, for sure.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.